will fight with my husband. I don't have to listen to a door slamming. And I don't have to listen to my husband enraged by your utter lack of respect. Alvin took us in and supports us. He has made us a family. No, Mom, he's made you his family, and thrown me out. Hiccup told her angrily. Hiccup, you chose to leave, she told him. I want to come home, he said softly. Please, Mom, I'll do whatever he says. I'll do all the chores he sets, I'll say nothing, just let me come home. But you promised to try harder when you took me to the doctor, and that lasted a few days only, she condemned him. Alvin and I have discussed this. You just cannot live here anymore. Where am I supposed to go, he asked. You seem to have managed so far, Valka told him firmly. That's really not my concern anymore, is it? But I'm your son, Mom. He protested. Please, I love you. And where have you been all week, Hiccup? I have worried, but not a word. Alvin told me you were alive, but did you think to contact me? I was worried you wouldn't answer me. Please, Mom, don't turn me away. He said softly. I can't cope with the stress you bring, Hiccup, she told him shortly. I've been so much better since you left. And I can only assume the reason why I was unwell was you. Mom, no, he breathed, backing away. Please, you're all I have. You're my mom. We can work this out. Hiccup, you can't stay here, Valka said. Just go. Please just go. Mom. He begged, lunging forward, but the door slammed in his face. He slammed his fists on the door, howling in despair. Mom. Go, she called, as a car pulled onto the drive. He looked around and saw Alvin struggling out, his face dark with rage at seeing the boy. Hiccup dodged aside, seeing the man lunge at him. Running, he glanced back and saw the man standing protectively between the boy and the house. Get out of here, boy. Alvin shouted. I catch your air again and I'll have the police take you away. You're not welcome here anymore. Hiccup cast a final broken look over his shoulder as he ran from the drive, his legs carrying him away as fast as he could. He wouldn't cry because that would be weak, but it had to be the bitter cold, not the total rejection, that made his eyes water and his throat tighten, but he knew even the cold couldn't explain the burning pain in his broken heart. Chapter 42, Belong. Chapter text. Astrid was having lots more fun than she expected at Camille's house. She had been concerned about leaving Hiccup with her parents, but her mom had promised to look after him. Now, it was early evening and the rest of the class would be going to Lila's party, though Astrid had a suspicion a few wouldn't, because they had asked Astrid and the class president had mentioned that she wouldn't be going. No explanation, but her tone had made it clear that she didn't consider it a party to go to. The four girls all sighed as the fourth episode of BFF ended. It was the latest hit show for the fall and the girls were all obsessed with the plot and stars. Down in Camille's basement, which was made up with sofas, fold-out beds, TV and mini kitchen, the girls were relaxed and giggly. The weather was cold and it was sleeting, no one wanted to be going out tonight. Astrid snagged the final slice of the Florentine pizza and munched as Camille collapsed back onto the bed. Mason Danson is totally dreamy, she sighed, imagining the handsome star of BFF. You know, I'd camp out on his doorstep if he was at BH. Irretiritzen all the way. Ruff grinned. Those brown eyes, dreamy. Heather gave a small smile, dunking her tortilla chips in the salsa. Blue eyes for me, she smiled. Camille cocked an eyebrow, there were a few options available. Ast. Home. Green, emerald green. She murmured before realizing what she had said. Snot's eyes are blue, not green, Ruff pointed out. And for the millionth time, I am not going out with Snotlout, ever. Astrid snapped. No way. He loves himself, I thought it was summer thing, but no. There's no room there except for Snotlout in that relationship. Besides, he's a total muttonhead who's obsessed with his yardage and his muscles, not in that order. Wow. You've been thinking about him. Heather teased her. No way. Way. Ruff grinned. You know you'll be going to the prom with him. Yuck. How can people who claim to be my friends persist in this stupidity? Astrid snapped. I cannot stand Snotlout. And I will never go out with him anywhere. So this is end of. Not a single word more or I swear I will kill you all and bury the bodies so far into the woods they'll never find you. They all stared at her, then burst out laughing. Jennifer your theme, BFF episode 3. Cammy giggled. Astrid grinned as well but waved her finger at them. Just, respect my choice, okay, she asked them gently. Please stop trying to match me up with someone I can't stand. I'll find the right guy in my own time. But it's gotta be one of the team. Ruff told her, aghast. Please not Tough. No, that would be weird, Ruff. Astrid reassured her. And Eret is taken. Ruff reminded her. You're safe, Astrid added. Though he's not, poor guy, she added silently. I'll figure it out, okay. And then the doorbell rang. Cammy grinned and sped upstairs as the girls settled on the couch and Heather sorted another round of sodas. Have you got enough for us? A horribly familiar voice said. Astrid's eyes widened as Snotlout walked cockily down the steps, grinning as his eyes fell on Astrid. And there goes the neighborhood, she muttered. Look who came round. Cammy grinned like the cat who had got the cream. Thank Ruff for talking her brother into coming. Heather added, her eyes lighting up as she spied the large shape of fish legs following Snotlout, Eret and Tough down the stairs. We've got the stars of the team here. Suck that, Lilla. Ruff laughed. Just you and me, Princess Snotlout grinned, settling next to Astrid and sitting far too close. She got up and glared at her friends. Girls, what were we just talking about? She said icily. Eyes Ruff grinned. You were blue, right? No, Ruff, I go for guys with green eyes, Astrid snapped. You know I can't stay for a sleepover where there are boys. My parents would go extraterrestrial. Snotlout laid a hand on her arm and leaned closer. Don't worry, Princess, I'll keep you company. He promised, a cocky grin covering his face. Remove your hand or lose it. Astrid snapped. Cammy, a word. She grabbed the smaller blonde and almost dragged her into the kitchenette. What in Odin's name is this? She hissed. We're just trying to make you feel better, Ast, she said, looking a little hurt. Lilla hasn't got you, us, the core of the football team, and half the year won't go despite saying they will because you've basically said you've blown Lilla off. If she was trying to replace you as Queen Bee, she's totally failed. Epic fail. Ruff added. Super epic fail. Tough grinned and fist bumped with his twin. Cammy, either the boys go or I have to, Astrid snapped. The other girl gave a wicked grin. No one needs to know, Ast. I'll know, and my dad will literally go insane, Astrid said quietly. I promised it was just us, I can't break my promise like that. Ast, you gotta learn to chill and have fun. Cammy told her, her eyes trailing over the football players. Maybe if you get to know. Astrid glared at her. I have already got to know Snotlout and I really can't stand the guy, she spat. You girls have fun, I'll get my parents to pick me up. Or, come on, Ast. Cammy whined. It's so much more fun with you, and Snotlout was promised you would be here. Astrid's skull deepened. I'm calling my dad, Astrid said firmly. Sorry, Cammy, but you know my parents, and after Ruff's party, I'm not about to risk any more trouble. She turned away and cast around, grabbing her bag and digging out her phone. She was walking to the stairs when Snotlout popped up in the way. Where are you going, Princess? He asked persistently, preening and flexing his muscles. Want me to go with you? Yuck. No. Astrid snapped, her eyes scanning the buff player's face. Do you know why I am leaving, Snotlout? There was a pause and the boy looked as if he was starting to panic. Is that a trick question? He asked suspiciously. No, Astrid said sweetly, though I'm sorry it hurts your head to think. I don't want to spend time with you, Snot. You need to decide if you just love yourself or you could ever consider anyone else. Ha! Snot, get out of my way or I will hurt you, she sighed and shoved past him, punching him in the middle. He gave a pained groan. She's crazy about me, he wheezed. She just can't contain herself. But as Astrid hit the call button, her mind drifted to a pair of green eyes, topped by messy auburn hair, and found that rather than Snotlout's stupid self-absorption, she really wanted someone with a quick wit and razor-sharp sarcasm. She blinked at the image that sprang to mind and pushed away the warm feeling that curled in her chest. The girls must never know. Chapter 43, Unintended Friend. Chapter text. Astrid stared through the window as her father drove her home. The wiper was smearing sleet across the windshield and the evening was looking dark and miserable. Really, she would have wanted to stay, but Snotlout was incredibly irritating and she knew her parents would get mad if they found out. She had dodged enough trouble with the party and she had learned to choose her battles. An evening being pestered by Snotlout just wasn't worth the effort. Her father had been quietly pleased she had been responsible and she smiled. She loved her parents, despite their unrealistic expectations, and she wondered how Hiccup had gotten on visiting his mom. It struck her as weird that his mother wouldn't even worry that he had gone missing, and then she reminded herself that she knew nothing really about his home life. She could only judge him on how he behaved with her parents, and it was very different to the sarcastic boy from school. Clambering out of the car, she grinned at her mom and dumped her bag. "Sorry, it's me," she said with a smile. "Guess I've ruined your plans for this evening." Ingrid looked at her husband. "We were going to go out, but we were waiting for Hiccup to come back," she admitted. Astrid started. "He's not back?" she asked, her blue eyes worried. "He went out early." Martin Horferson scowled. He wanted to know the outcome of the visit because he wasn't at all keen on keeping the boy in his home. He was hoping the absence was because Hiccup was safely home with his family, but he accepted the boy would probably let his daughter know if he wasn't coming back. "I'm sure he'll turn up," he said, casting his wife a look. "You guys go out," Astrid said. "I'll feed the dogs and relax in front of the TV. Don't forget the test's coming up in a week," Martin said sternly. "You can't slacken off now, Martin," Ingrid said reprovingly. "For sake. It's Saturday night. Harvard Law won't drop their standards because my daughter wants a night off. Even though I was at a sleepover and wouldn't be working anyway." Astrid sighed. He kissed her cheek. "I just want what's best for you," he said, handing Ingrid her coat. "We'll be back by 11. Have a good time," she called, frustrated but forcing a smile. She waved as their car pulled out and groaned once she had closed the door. After dumping her bag in her room, she heard her phone ring. It was Cammy and she opened Skype. "Hey, sister, look what we're up to," the girl grinned, panning her phone round to show the others entwined in a game of Twister. "That had to be Ruff's idea." Astrid smirked. "Actually, it was Heather's. You know those blue eyes she likes, they belong to fish legs." "No way." "Very much way." Cammy winked. "Snotlout is consoling himself by drinking and trying to win. Iret's totally thrashing him as well. Poor Snotikins. Not his day." Astrid smiled. "Can I quote you on that?" Cammy teased her. "You're a dead woman if you do." Astrid threatened her and Cammy burst out laughing. Okay, I could see you really weren't happy when he turned up. I am actually sorry," she admitted with a sigh. "You know if never do anything to hurt you." "I know," Astrid said, wandering into the kitchen to get a drink and peered out of the window. She stiffened and then Cammy looked around as shouts floated across. "Gotta go," she said. "I think Snotlout wants to kill Tough, and Iret is cornered by Ruff. Good luck," Astrid said as she clicked the phone off and peered into the gloom, and then she quickly fetched her coat, hat and scarf and let herself out into the yard. Quietly she walked to the kennel and paused, then crouched by the shape huddled by the skinny black dog. Hiccup was sitting against the side of the kennel, his knees hard against his chest. His hair was dark and plastered against his bowed head and his clothes were soaking. Toothless was pressed against his side, his big green eyes fixed on the boy, whining slightly. The girl swiped sleet out of her eyes and sighed. "Are you okay?" she asked him, and he slowly raised his head to look at her. "Do I look it?" he asked her and coughed into his hand. "No, you look like a drowned rat," she pointed out. "Thanks for summing that up." "I'm really enjoying the fine Burke weather," he mumbled. "Mom was worried," she said softly, and he swallowed. "Yeah, rub it in," he shot at her, his tone bitter. "It didn't go well." Astrid's words made him wince. "You think?" "I mean, however did you guess?" he asked sarcastically. "You've been gone for hours, you're still here and you're sitting in the yard in the snow, looking utterly miserable." She ticked off briskly and he blinked. Just thinking, he murmured. Toothless nuzzled against him and he sighed. Yeah, but at least I have you. Astrid's eyes softened with sympathy at the tone. Aren't you supposed to be at your friend's for a sleepover? She flinched at the question. I'll tell you if we can go inside, she suggested. He swiped the sodden hair off his face. You know, I'm good, he said and coughed. She rolled her eyes and grabbed his hand, pulling him to his feet. He didn't resist, but he didn't help either, and she struggled until he finally straightened up. See that, bud? She can't keep her hands off of me. Ah. You're soaking, she complained as she dragged him towards the kitchen door. Sitting in the rain will do that for you, he commented, his cold hand still grasped around hers. She dragged him into the house and began hauling his jacket off. Hey! Slow down, he yelped. She dropped his jacket on the floor with a splat, then hauled at his equally drenched hoodie and jumper. She huffed as she stared at the pile of soaked clothing. His baggy jeans were dark and heavy with rain, and even his trainers were soaked. He backed up as he saw her eyeing his remaining clothes. You'll get hypothermia, she briskly. Hey, I'll keep my pants, he protested, backing up. She planted her fists on her hips and scowled at him. Go upstairs, get out of those soaking clothes and have a warm shower, she ordered him. Once you're done, I'll get these things washed and dried. He stared at her and gave a small smile, a hand still clamped protectively over the waistband of his jeans. Yes, milady, he said and trudged up the stairs. She heard the shower turn on and run for a few minutes as she wrung out the jacket and hung it over a radiator. She'd made 2 mugs of hot chocolate and dashed out to feed the dogs when he reappeared, dressed in the faded training pants and scruffy t-shirt she recognized as his pajamas. His hair was towel drier and stuck out wildly, but he still looked down as he delivered the dripping clothes. You gonna tell me what happened? She asked him. Thought you were up first, he shot back. She pushed his chocolate to him and sat opposite, sipping hers and frowning. I was supposed to be at Cammy's having a girls' night, she said. Lila had organized a party and forgotten to invite me, so the girls and I decided to miss it. We were having fun when half the team arrived invited by Cammy. Snotlout was being hugely irritating, so I decided I needed to leave. My parents don't like me being at parties anyway, especially if they haven't given permission. You really are goody two-shoes, Hiccup commented, sipping his chocolate and watching her blush slightly. I'd have stayed. But you don't respect authority, have a horrible relationship with your parents and are a guy, she shot back. His face tightened in a grimace and his eyes hardened. And why do you say that? Because you won't get grounded for being at a party with the opposite sex, Astrid told him. He frowned. Duh, no, he said sarcastically. Because even with my horrible parental relations, they aren't that insane. I mean, what is the point? I think my dad thinks I will get distracted, turn into a rebel and my grades will bomb, she told him. He quirked an eyebrow and smothered a chuckle. So that's why he keeps scowling at me, he said lightly. He must have guessed my master plan. You. Ha. Snotlout is far more persistent and he's not even got to first base in over 3 years. Well, he is an ass, Hiccup pointed out cheerfully. And he's totally oblivious to anyone but Snotlout. If you want, I can make life a little uncomfortable for him, just to cheer you up. She stared at him, gaping. How, she stammered. He sighed. You know, personal protective sports equipment. She nodded slowly. Well, it's pretty easy to doctor it so that deep heat or something similar accidentally gets in there. She stared at him open-mouthed. Why would you even think? She asked, aghast. He shrugged. You mean apart from it being hilarious? Someone hurts someone you care for, the only option is to hurt them back so they don't do it again. He told her calmly. You realize you just claimed you care for me, she pointed out, and he stiffened, then looked at his mug again. Just grateful, he mumbled. So am I, she admitted with a sigh. His emerald eyes flicked up and his hands tightened round the mug. That was nothing, he murmured softly. Dad would be ashamed if I let you down, if I left you in danger. He paused and stared hard at the table. He'd be very ashamed of me now, because I've let Mom down. I left her with him, left her to believe in him, and turn on me. She stared at him, hearing the lightness leave his voice. You had no choice, did you? She asked softly. He shook his head. I could have been braver, he said in a shamed voice. I should have gone back, no matter what Elle said, and made her choose. I should have shown her what he was like. She chose him, didn't she? She realized. He swallowed. She sent me away, and said she felt better, and was happier without me. He whispered quietly. He pressed a hand to his face. I failed, Dad. He closed his eyes and leaned his elbows on the table, covering his face with his hands. You did everything you could, she reassured him, rising and gently coming to stand by him. She hesitated, then rested a hand on his shoulder. He stiffened and slowly raised his head, craning his neck to stare at her. Then he shook his head. I wasn't brave enough to stay, he said bitterly, but her grip on his shoulder tightened. You were brave enough to save me no matter the consequences, she said, staring into his eyes. And you know you have a home here, as long as you need. He stared into her face, palming his cheek and sighed. I think that depends on your dad, he admitted. And I guess he thinks I may ruin his perfect daughter's grades. She leaned closer to him. Can I tell you a secret? She asked him. His green eyes widened and he nodded. I choose my battles carefully. Party with Snotlout not worth the effort. Tutoring, worth it. But I will fight to make sure you have a home no matter what, because you saved me when you didn't need to. Actually, I think I did, he said quietly. The only decent thing to do. You know most people wouldn't consider the words decent and Haddock in the same sentence, she asked him. Shows what they know, he muttered. I know better, she told him. He managed a faint smile. Thanks, he said and slowly rose to his feet. I think I'll turn in, he murmured, but she grabbed his hand and hauled him to living room. Oh no, she said, dragging him to the couch and grabbing the TV remote. I have an evening off and I have every intention spending it with my friends. So here you are. Me. His green eyes widened in shock. No, I'm talking to the other 3 people in here, she snapped. He rolled his eyes. Have you checked under the couch to make sure no one you know is here? He asked. I mean, you can't be seen to actually talk to me or acknowledge I exist. I know you exist. She protested. But I am not watching that movie on my own. His lips twitched at the titles of a horror movie. Oh, you need someone brave for this, he teased her. Yeah, she said, clicking the TV on and settling by him. He sat self-consciously next to her, feeling the warmth from her arm as it almost touched his, and then she gave a small shriek and buried her face in his shoulder. Oh, not a fan, he guessed with a smirk. No. I really like these, ag, she screamed and buried her face in his chest. Would it help if I explained that's just a man in a mask, he suggested. No, she protested. Has he gone yet? I think he's the main character, milady, he explained as she looked up, screamed and cuddled against him again. Oh Thor, I hope Snotlout never hears of this, he muttered to himself. What? She asked, lifting her head. His green eyes popped wide. Nothing, he said quickly as she flinched and buried her face in his chest. Well, why do you watch this? Or not? I enjoy being scared, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. He cautiously moved an arm round her. What are you doing? Getting a cramp, he protested. You're squashing my arm. She fidgeted. Okay. It's kinda comforting. Oh Thor. He muttered. Adios, reputation. Did you just say something? She asked, staring up at his amused face. Somehow, the despondency from earlier had lifted as she snuggled against him. No. Just that is a really bad mask, he muttered. She hazarded a glance, screamed and buried her face again. Boy, you'd be a delight to take to the movies, he added. Was that you asking for a date? She murmured. I would have to take you to Berserk to avoid the lynch mob, he told her with a sigh. I mean, Miss Perfect Class President on a date with Haddock the screw-up. As if. You're warm, she murmured, snuggling against him. So are you. He admitted. Astrid, thanks. I mean it. Why are welcome, she murmured and relaxed against him. It didn't take long before she was asleep, and he managed a smile as he reached for the remote and switched to something less scary. "Sleep well, milady," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Her lips stretched in a smile and she stirred slightly in her sleep, though her eyes remained closed. "Sleep well, Hiccup," she mumbled sleepily and wrapped her arms around him. He rested his cheek against her head and felt his eyelids grow heavy as he stared at the screen. When Ingrid and Martin returned much later, they found the two curled together, a little smile on Hiccup's face with Astrid snuggled asleep against him. Chapter 44, He's Not a Threat to Astrid. Chapter text. Hiccup's eyes snapped open as a hand shook him and he raised his head, to meet Martin Horfuson's cold blue gaze. Blearily, he blinked and tried to work out where he was, why his neck was stiff, and why he had something warm and soft in his arms. And then he pulled away in utter shock, eyes wide in horror as he realized he was holding Astrid, and her overprotective father, who didn't want him there anyway, was leaning over him with an unfriendly look on his face. He swallowed in anxiety and pulled away, but Astrid was wrapped around him, a little smile on her face. "What the hell are you doing?" Martin snarled at him and he went stiff, images of Alvin flashing across his memory. It's not what it looks," he said urgently, hyperventilating. We were just watching a movie and we kinda fell asleep." Martin glared at her, but Ingrid rested a hand on his arm. "How dare you!" Martin spat through his teeth, fists tightening, but his wife gripped his arm harder. "Were you never young?" she asked him. He scowled at the boy, his eyes raking the skinny shape that was literally trying to crawl back through the couch. Then he leaned forward, sliding his arms under the sleeping Astrid and lifting her away from the boy. Hiccup cringed further back, shying from the man and breathing hard. Without a backwards look, Martin carried his daughter tenderly out and Hiccup heard him clamber up the stairs. I didn't do anything." Hiccup gabbled, his eyes turning pleadingly on Ingrid, and the woman rolled her eyes. "Really?" She stared at him and sighed. "You know, I think I believe you," she said, "because you're not really friends, are you?" "I don't know what we are," he sighed. "I think we may be almost friends here, but I am nothing at school. I'm not popular or cool, Mrs. H." She wanted to watch a movie because she missed out on her girly night, and then it was too scary, so she just clung to me and fell asleep, and then, I did as well. His head dropped. "I didn't touch her or anything creepy. I mean, I literally depend on her kindness for a roof over my head. Why would I risk that, when she could break my wrist anyway if I put a finger out of place?" He stretched and his neck cracked. He winced and slowly clambered to his feet. "I am certain of that," Ingrid said with amusement, hearing the uncertainty in the boy's voice. He looked afraid and defeated, and Astrid's mother felt her heart sink. Am I being sent away?" he asked quietly. Ingrid stared into the desperate eyes and gently caught his skinny shoulder. "Your mother sent you away, didn't she?" He nodded, his face pale and eyes dark with pain. "I won't send you away, Hiccup," she said slowly. "I think you deserve a chance, but be careful how you behave around my husband. He's very protective around Astrid." He nodded urgently. Totally understand," he said quietly. "I mean, she's clever and smart and kind and beautiful and athletic and good at pretty much everything. You must be so proud of her. And I am definitely the class screw-up. I mean, it must be a federal offense for me to even be seen with her." Her lips quirked at his desert dry humor. "And I have no intentions towards her whatsoever. At all. Not even slightly. I just like having someone who will actually talk to me, some of the time." He flinched as he heard Martin approach and walk through the door. "Hiccup, I think you know what I have to say," he said grimly as the boy backed away urgently, his eyes wide and fearful, his shoulders hunching in fear and arms raising to half protect his face. Ingrid grabbed her husband's arm as she saw his sudden panic, and felt Martin tense in shock. "Martin, he's not a threat to Astrid," she said urgently, watching the man stare in shock at the cringing boy. Martin's quick blue gaze swept over the bruises on the boy's face and the swollen left hand, the bruise in the shape of a heel visible on the back of his hand. He stared for a moment longer, then consciously relaxed. "I am not going to hurt you, boy," he said sternly. Hiccup lifted his panicked gaze and shook his head. Sorry if I'm not really believing you." "Sorry," he murmured, backing up another pace. Martin stared at Ingrid. He didn't harm her, she insisted. They were just watching TV. He stared at the tall, skinny shape and sighed. But he protested, and Hiccup's shoulders slumped. He stared at the floor. I understand, he sighed and smothered a cough, trying to lift his chin. I'm sorry, I didn't harm her, she just wanted someone to watch the film with her. I never meant to fall asleep. He shook his head slightly and Martin felt Ingrid's grip on his arm tighten. He looked at her and read the determination in her face. He can stay, but he is not to distract Astrid, he said coldly. Hiccup stared at him. Sorry. He murmured. No distracting. Got it. Can I go to bed, please? Ingrid smiled and nodded as the boy skirted the far side of the couch and sprinted up the stairs. Martin stared at his wife in shock. Did that just happen? He asked. She nodded sadly, her hands sliding to his chest. His mother rejected him, and his stepfather is abusive, she explained with a sigh. I promised we would give him a chance, Martin. I think we are the only people who will. No one else is going to. As long as he doesn't cause Astrid any trouble or affect her grades, then he can stay, he said reluctantly. I'm trusting you on this, Ingrid. She nodded. Are they? She smiled. I don't think so, she assured him. Astrid doesn't have a boyfriend. And Hiccup is very dependent on her. I don't think she's in any danger from him. He looked at her with a small smile, though his eyes were pensive. You know more about him, don't you? He said thoughtfully. I have spoken to him and to his mother, she admitted. I knew her and his father back when Astrid was in elementary school. She was a completely different person then. She sighed. That young man promised to watch out for our daughter, Martin. I believe he will do what he promises. And I promised him a chance. So we owe him that, because I think we may be his only hope. Chapter 45, Unwelcome Lodger. Chapter text. Sunday morning was awkward, as Hiccup tried his hardest to avoid Martin and not feel too embarrassed with Astrid. The sleet had turned to proper snow overnight, but the sidewalks were clear and Astrid had gone out running. Hiccup peeled himself from the bed and trudged to the shower, wearily clicking the water on and sluicing himself clean. He couldn't believe what had happened, and that he wasn't already out of the streets. And he was ashamed and angry at himself for the way that he had reacted to Astrid's dad. The man wasn't Alvin and he had no reason to believe he would physically harm him, but there had been far too much taken from him recently for him to relax. He face-palmed and dried himself, dressing swiftly in his other pair of jeans, a long-sleeved brown t-shirt and a mismatched pair of socks, which was all he had left, and then made his way downstairs. Neither of Astrid's parents were there, so he found himself some toast and grabbed his clothes from the dryer. His trainers had dried overnight and he pulled on his hoodie, jumper and jacket as well and let himself out into the yard. Toothless, at least, was pleased to see him, bouncing up and down and licking his friend thoroughly. Hiccup dropped to his knees and hugged the dog, playing with him for a few minutes before casting around and finding the snow shovel. He rubbed his cold hands to warm them, then sighed. Come on, bud, keep me company, he murmured, and the dog walked alongside, his tail wagging wildly as the boy made it to the front drive and began shoveling. His hands were cold, but he soon warmed up as he put his back into the effort of clearing the drive. It was a job he had to do whenever it snowed for Alvin, and he was used to spending hours shoveling snow. Unusually, he had Toothless to keep him company, and the dog insisted on bounding around and jumping into the pile of snow. Despite the fact he was tired and hot, Hiccup couldn't help laughing and stopping to get the dog out of the snowdrifts. He was almost finished when he heard a voice behind him. What do you think you're doing? He spun round, seeing Martin Horferson. He backed up a pace. Clearing the drive, he said, swiping the sweat from his face. I can put the snow back if you want. Who told you to do this? Martin asked him. No one. I'm expected to do this when it snows, so I kinda thought you might want me to do the same, he explained, breathing hard. Martin looked around, his eyes sweeping over the meticulously cleared drive, the neatly piled snow and the cleared sidewalk. He stared at the boy, flushed with exertion, and nodded. Good job. Thank you, he said briskly and turned back into the house. Hiccup sagged with relief and nuzzled the dog in relief. Did that just happen? He murmured. Did what just happen? Astrid asked, panting up, her cheeks flushed with exertion from her run. Your dad didn't shout at me. He murmured. Walking forward, she inspected the drive and grinned. Good job, she complimented him. He twitched a small smile. Why thank you. I also clear yards and sidewalks, he announced mildly and gave a small bow. She laughed, walking up to him. Thanks for last night, she said softly, and he immediately looked embarrassed. No sweat, he said awkwardly. You really don't like horror movies, do you? She shrugged, blushing. The others all like them, and when we go to the multiplex we always choose the horror movie, but, no, she admitted. Can't you say you'd rather go to another film? He asked her in surprise. She shook her head. Horror is cool, she sighed, so I have to be cool. Even when you hate the films. That's dumb, he scoffed, and she stared at him sharply. I mean, why go through something you hate just for the sake of being cool? If people are your friends, they'll accept your likes and dislikes, and go to something you all wanna see. Well, what do you know? I mean, you hang around WTH people who actually hurt you. Going to a film I don't like isn't anywhere near as stupid. I never said I was any smarter, he shouted at her. I just hate the idea of you having to put up with something you don't like when it's not necessary. You do far worse. You act like a total ass with them. Maybe I am a total ass, he shouted. It goes with everything else everyone says about me. I was just sharing my wisdom with Miss Perfect, but she doesn't wanna listen. Fine. He handed her the snow shovel. You can put this away. I'm going for a walk. Toothless. And he stormed away, the dog bounding along after him. Astrid stared after him and blinked. What was that all about? She murmured. Oh. The sounds of banging and a very rough engine filled the air as he walked into the front of the forge, closing the door quietly as he turned back to the workshop. His green eyes scanned the space, looking for the familiar shape, and he steeled himself for an argument. What you doing here, boy? Gobber growled, limping forward. He was wiping his hand on an oily rag and his grimy coveralls were stretched over his ample shape. You're not welcome here. Oh, come on, Gobber. Hiccup sighed. I came to talk, to apologize. Hey. That's rich. Gobber scoffed. I only did nay press charges 'cause you're the son of my best friend. Hiccup frowned, talking a few paces closer. He really didn't want to argue with Gobber because he missed his friend, he missed his job, and he missed the feeling of belonging to something. And you never let me explain anything, he protested. Gobber, you were mad at me when I stopped those guys breaking in. Did you not see the mess? Gobber growled. I was asleep and it was dark, I was going to clear up when I woke. I did not give ye permission to sleep in the shop. Gobber snapped. No. You didn't say no either. Hiccup pointed up, walking a pace closer. I asked for help and you were out of your apartment because of the flood, but I had nowhere to go. It was here or outside. You could have gone to the authorities. Gobber pointed out. Hiccup's brows pulled down in a scowl. Yeah, that was going to happen, he retorted. I get thrown out bile and end up in a home. I'd rather freeze. And then you attack me in revenge. Gobber snapped as Hiccup backed up a pace, shaking his head. Gobber, those guys are dangerous, he protested. They ordered me to come with them. They had a knife. Ye could have not come. And the next day, when they found me at school. Hiccup asked him shortly, exasperated. Gobber, that's why I warned you. I had no choice, but I didn't want your shop broken into or burnt down. But ye broke into the back door. Menu back door. Gobber snarled. They had a knife. Hiccup protested, his eyes wide with dismay. Gobber, I would never hurt you, you know that. Is this person bothering you, sir? A clear and familiar voice had Hiccup groaning as a tall, black-haired and built young man walked forward, his clean coveralls stretched over his muscular shape. Hiccup stared at Irette with incredulity. You gave him my job, he scoffed. When you claimed the shop wasn't making enough to keep me on. Gobber scowled at him. I've had a busy run and needed someone. He snapped. Hiccup gave him a betrayed look, breathing hard. And you didn't have my number. Or, come on. He isn't a quarter of the mechanic I am. Gobber? Irette asked, his fists tightening. He's just a troublemaker. Gee, thanks. Hiccup said sarcastically. I reckoned I rated a bit more than that. Great mechanic, security guard and buddy at the very least. You're not what I thought ye were. Gobber growled. You're a treacherous little bastard who turned on me. Wrong, wrong and wrong. Hiccup replied angrily. Gobber, you're my friend and I'm gutted you'd think I'd hurt you. That I would do anything to harm your business. I think my dad would be ashamed at what you've done. Dinna play that card, lad, because it cuts both ways. Gobber sneered. Your dad would be spinning in his grave at what your VE become. A disgrace to your mother, your family and yourself. Don't mention Mom. Hiccup ground out through his teeth. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a troublemaker and a sarcastic little shit. Gobber said. I can see why your stepdad would throw ye out. Git outta here. I got nothing more to say to ye. Irette walked forward and grabbed Hiccup's arm. The boss has spoken, he said and pulled on the boy's arm. Hiccup struggled. Get off of me, he snarled. Gobber. You are supposed to be my godfather. My dad trusted you to help and protect me. He would never give up on me. But you abandoned me like everyone else. Then he watched as Gobber turned away as well, lumbering back to the shop as Irette hauled the struggling boy to the entrance. Never thought you to be so pathetic, Haddock, Irette sneered as he shoved Hiccup through the front door and onto the snowy street. Don't worry though. Gobber's managing fine without you. And he slammed the door behind him, leaving Hiccup glaring at the door. Gobber. He sighed. Why couldn't you just give me a chance? He pressed his hands to his face. You were my friend, the one person I could rely on. Why did you have to let me down when I needed you? Chapter 46, Covert Friend. Chapter text. Astrid found it hard to concentrate on her homework as her mind kept drifting back to Hiccup's words. She couldn't understand why he had become so angry at her for wanting to remain popular. Of course, she could understand the sense in his words, but her position in senior year depended on her being popular and cool. Surely even Hiccup Haddock could understand that, and then she kicked herself. He understood too well, but he had learned that doing things just for popularity which you hated ultimately wasn't worth it. She sighed and reread the page. Tests were coming up and nothing seemed to stick. She was concentrating too much on Hiccup and not enough on Viking history. So she was relieved when she heard footsteps and saw Hiccup walk swiftly past, his head down and shoulders slumped. She heard his door slam and laid her pen down. She knew from her mother that she had fallen asleep on Hiccup while watching the movie, and Ingrid had told her that her dad had been furious to find the two snuggled asleep together. Hiccup was on some sort of a final warning from her dad, which could have explained his temper. But then he had vanished and it was now late afternoon and he was only just back. And he didn't look happy. With a sigh, she got up and walked to his door. Go away. Hiccup called. She ignored him and pushed the door open, peering in. He was curled on his side on the bed, looking away from the door. Hiccup, she asked gently. What part of go away don't you understand? He asked sarcastically, still staring away from her. I was worried, she admitted. You've been out all day, with no lunch. Not hungry, he lied. Did you want something, Astrid? She paused. You're right, she said suddenly, feeling self-conscious. You're right about the movie thing. True friends would respect my choice as well. There was a pause and he rolled to face her, pushing himself up into a lopsided sitting position. His auburn hair was very messy but his face was twisted in a lopsided smirk and his emerald eyes glittered. Did you just say I was right? He asked her in an amused voice. She blushed. I conceded a point, she said tartly. One tiny small thing. Really? How tiny and small? He sat up to face her and she sighed. Okay, it was a good point, she admitted. I'm sure my girls wouldn't mind if we saw something different, and if they did, they are not proper friends. And I know not proper friends, he sighed. I guess everyone who was supposed to be my friend, wasn't. She caught the edge of his voice and saw the brief misery in his eyes. Not everyone. She found herself saying. He tilted his head and looked at her, still smirking. You volunteering? He asked. I was thinking Toothless, she said smugly, and then regretted in when she caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes. Hey, there's still time for him to go off with Stormfly and leave me hanging, he said bitterly, and she cringed inwardly. He'd never do that, she protested. How do you know? He's so cute, she told him. And he really loves you. Thought my mom did as well, he muttered. No biggie. Can't be worth the effort. And you've got me, she blurted out. He stared at her and shook his head. Really? So you're willing to be seen in daylight with me? He asked sarcastically. She opened her mouth and gaped. Just as I thought, he smirked. Hiccup. You know I have a position to maintain. She protested. He stared at her and shook his head. And that is so much more important than being yourself. He sighed. It's okay for you, she protested. I mean, your hiccup. And she saw his face harden. And I don't count. No. I never said that. You were thinking it. No. But you don't seem to care for all the social order. She protested, feeling under attack. Only because I'm a social leper, he reminded her. She sighed and quietly nodded. But you still understand, she murmured, and he nodded. She was looking flustered, and though he was still hurt, he still remembered how she had grabbed his hand and insisted he watch the movie with her. He sighed. Okay, he said finally. I know. Getting you to go to a movie you like is different to actually being seen talking to me. We can be, what, covert friends? I already thought we were, she said, feeling relieved. It had been troubling her that he was staying while he was still just another kid. It all felt better with him actually being an official sort of friend. He smiled and guessed what she was thinking. Has your sense of order been restored? He teased her, and she grinned. Why, yes it has. Thank you very much, she told him brightly. He winked. Always happy to oblige, milady, he smirked. So, what are you doing about the tests? She asked him, and the smile instantly fell from his face. Failing them, he told her. She planted her fists on her hips. Now that just isn't going to happen. She told him. Don't you care? Not really, he said tonelessly. I doubt Elle would let me graduate anyway, so why bother? Or you could get back at him by making him have to award you your diploma, she said, her eyes narrowing. He shrugged. Not happening, he shrugged, and she walked to the bed, grabbing his hand. Hey! Hands off the merchandise, he protested. You, Mr. Skinny, are coming with me, she decided. Even if you don't care, I do, so you can help me revise, and you will learn something as well. Oh Thor. Being a social leper was much easier, he muttered, but allowed himself to be pulled along to her room, taking care to sit a non-threatening distance from her as she lobbed a book at him. Okay. Viking history, she said, her blue eyes sparkling with amusement. He flicked through the book. First 8 chiefs of Berk, he began. Oh please, challenge me, she scoffed, and he watched her brow furrow slightly as she concentrated. She really was very beautiful, and he had to concentrate hard to listen to her words rather than just stare at her. In order they are. Oh. The day slid by, cold and snowy and really Burkian. Hiccup walked to the next stop every day despite his lack of warm coat and boots, so he wasn't seen getting on the bus with Astrid and accepted being blanked by her. He was snooky and sarcastic in class, accepting his detentions with calm resignation. Practice for the football team and the cheerleaders moved into the gym, so Astrid had to put up with even more flirting by Snotlout, and Lilla was furious with her because apparently she had ruined her party. She had cornered Astrid at Monday lunchtime and slammed down at her table. You bitch! Lilla snapped. Astrid looked up from her lunch and rolled her eyes. What? She asked in exasperation as Ruff and Cammy stopped their discussions to focus on the intruder. You deliberately told people to steer clear. Lilla hissed. Astrid smiled. Hey, they just asked me if I was going, and as you didn't ask me, I said no. She gave an innocent look. If they decide a party without me isn't worth going to, whose fault is that? Lilla almost choked. And what about the team? She snarled. You mean Ruff's brother and his friends? Why shouldn't they come round to spend time with us? Astrid asked. Then she leaned forward. I understand your insecurity and your jealousy, Lila, I really do, but if you had asked me for my help, it would have gone so much better. There was silence in the canteen as Lila slapped her. I'll get you for this, she spat and flounced out. Bitch. Cammy snapped as Astrid lifted a hand to her stinging cheek. She glanced after Lila and saw Hiccup staring after her with a calculating look on his face. He turned his head to meet her gaze, then gave a slight nod, and then rose and left the canteen. Astrid frowned and then turned back to her friends, who were bitching about Lila. She sighed, somehow Hiccup was right. Being popular was a pain. At the end of school, Astrid was going to her locker when she and Heather came across Lila and Savannah wrestling with Lila's locker door. Both girls were sweating and muttering. Unusually, Hiccup was lurking, watching the show. It was fine, earlier. Lila growled as with a huge tug, she finally managed to hurl the door open. And a bucket of fluorescent green goo exploded down and splattered Lila and Savannah full in the face. Lila's hair was dripping with the mess and her dress was drenched. She froze for a second, then gave a piercing scream, frantically attempting to wipe the gunk from her beautifully styled hair. Savannah pushed her back, whimpering as well, but as she tried to back away, her foot slipped on the puddle of goo and she fell backwards, knocking Savannah over as well. By now, everyone was helpless with laughter at the pair, lying tangled in one another on the ground, drenched in green goo. What is the meaning of this commotion? Mr. Treacher roared, elbowing through the crowd of laughing students. I think Lila and Savannah have had an accident, Astrid managed in a strangled voice, trying not to laugh. Look at my hair. Lila wailed. What is this stuff? It's your fault for pulling the locker too hard. Savannah shouted. Silence. Alvin growled, leaning forward to help them up. His foot slid on the goo almost on slow motion, and as he fell, Astrid could have sworn the whole hall shook. There was a shocked gasp, until a single laugh sounded, triggering everyone to start again. Astrid looked at Hiccup and saw a triumphant expression on his face. And though she knew it was wrong and mean and someone would certainly get into serious trouble, it had been very funny. Her phone buzzed. Did it for you? She looked up to meet Hiccup's smile as he turned to watch Lila slip over once more. Chapter 47, Be Thankful. Chapter text. The tests were in full swing, deliberately set to test the students ferociously. Even Astrid, the top-ranked student in the senior year, was stressed and struggling. Ruff was contemplating quitting school and signing up for the Loki mission in Antarctica, while Cammy's hair looked wilder than ever after every lesson and Heather was in a permanent bad mood. Hiccup kept to himself, generally ignored by the students, picked on by the teachers and menaced by Dager and his crew. Even Snotlout, who had very little insight, was worrying his marks may be so appalling he may fail to graduate and lose his scholarship. Head buzzing, Astrid headed to the library, her books on advanced calculus and algebra clutched in her arms and hoping she could get a quiet hour away from the other students. She had to put a good face on, even when she was feeling down and really pessimistic about her results, and math was next. Mr. Mildew had been gloating all week at the severity of the test he had set them. Shaking her head at the man's attitude, she wove her way through the stacks until she reached the furthest corner of the library, the dusty section for Viking lore and mythology, and then almost growled in irritation as she found someone already there. An auburn head lifted and Hiccup smiled at her. Looking for the quietest place to hide away, he asked her with a smirk. She dumped her books on the table and slumped into the old leather chair. What are you doing here? She huffed. He twirled his pencil in his left hand, cocking an eyebrow. Getting a break from tests and stressed students, he told her, leaning over his sketchpad and flipping over a new page, then swiftly sketching again. They just expect me to be so calm and cheerful, but these tests are so hard. I think the teachers want us all to fail. Wouldn't put it past them, he muttered, his hand flying across the sheet of paper. And these tests are so important. I mean, if I don't get straight A's, Dad won't fund me going to college. She sighed. If I go, and that's a huge if, I'll have to fund myself, Hiccup told her, pausing for a moment. She frowned. Well, Mum doesn't have any money and it'll be Ragnarok before my stepdad would spend a cent on me. He turned back to his sketch. What would you do if you went? She asked him. He paused and shaded a corner thoughtfully. Engineering, he said. I mean, my heart says art, but the rest of me, which has a tad of common sense, says do something using my drafting and mechanical skills. She stared at him and nodded. You'd be good, she said thoughtfully. I mean, how did you, Lila? He gave a small smirk. Those lockers aren't very secure, he admitted. And, well, I just had to think what Lila wouldn't like. Losing her dignity in front of the whole year would do it. She smiled at the memory. It was very mean, she told him, but her eyes twinkled with approval. Though nothing she didn't deserve. He nodded and turned the pad round to show a sketch of Astrid slumped in the chair. She gaped. You did that just now? He nodded. I find drawing relaxing, and mildew won't let me pass anyway, he shrugged. She scooted over to sit by him and peered at the image. That's superb, she murmured. Thanks, he said softly. Got a good subject. He tore it out and handed it to her. So it doesn't infringe your image rights, milady, he teased her, and she blushed, recalling how stupid she had been. Thanks, she murmured and tucked the picture carefully away. Then she sighed. I just can't get those last equations we learned, and we know mildew will put them in because we've had almost no work on them. Of course, Hiccup admitted. He gave a one-shouldered shrug. Look, they seem complicated, but they aren't. You just need to think of them like those abstract quadratics we did at the beginning of the semester. He beckoned her closer and demonstrated, and she frowned. Patiently, he explained again, and there was a pause before her face brightened. I understand, she said in surprise. How is it a teacher can't make me understand how these work, but it took you about 2 minutes? He gave a small smile. You're already good at math, I only had to point you in the right direction, he said with a small blush, that warmed to beet red as she leaned forward and pecked a kiss on his cheek. She gave a small smile. Thanks, Hiccup, she said as he awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment. You're welcome, he mumbled, as steps closed. He glanced up and pointed urgently behind the stack on Ragnarok. Astrid grabbed her books and scuttled out of sight as the powerful, bald librarian, silent Sven Bagall, loomed over the boy. Hiccup looked up with a smile, his cheeks still hot with embarrassment. You've been talking in the library, Sven said in his high-pitched voice. Hiccup stared at him and shook his head urgently. Is there someone else here? He nodded. Who? Hiccup pointed at Sven with a grin. The man's face fell into a furious scowl and grabbed Hiccup by the collar, hauling him from his seat and hardly granting him any time to grab his bag and books before he was hauled from the library. Astrid paused, then peered out from her hiding place. His sketchbook had fallen to the floor, along with his favorite pencil, and she swiftly stowed them in her bag, then headed for math. Hiccup arrived 15 minutes into the test, escorted in by Alvin, hunched and moving gingerly. He was shoved into a seat, handed the test paper and motioned to get on with it. Wincing, he fished out a pen and began on the difficult test, despite his shortened time. Astrid peered up between questions and saw his pen flying over the paper, his head bent over and face scrunched in concentration. She knew he understood the math, but even she was surprised at the determination in his face. When time was called, he had completed the last question just and looked up defiantly as his paper was collected. Mildew stared at him. No, I don't see why I should mark this as you came in late, he said, then ripped the paper in half. Your score is 0. Hiccup lurched to his feet. That is unfair, he protested through his teeth. I was detained by the principal, who knew I had to be in this test. I was allowed to take the test. I completed it, despite having less time. You have to mark it. I do not. Mildew's face was twisted in a cruel smile. Hiccup walked round and grabbed the torn halves of his paper. He shoved them in Mildew's face. Mark it, you miserable old bastard, he snarled. Otherwise, what is the point of you? Mildew gave a triumphant sneer. Get out, he snapped. You're out of me class permanently. Hiccup grabbed his bag and walked from the class, slamming the door. They heard the incoherent scream of rage and frustration through the door. Astrid stared after him and felt her stomach drop. The bell rang and the students filed out, but she paused and picked up the discarded pieces of Hiccup's test. Mildew scowled. "Sir, I need to request that his paper is marked," she said. He opened his mouth but she was quicker. "Sir, you let him take the test. You didn't refuse him permission to sit the test for arriving late. The student council has to support his right to have his work marked." "I'm sorry, Mr. Mildew." He scowled at her but accepted the pieces of the test, casting her unfriendly glances. She guessed he knew he had overstepped the bounds of his authority and he nodded. "He's still expelled from my class," he growled. "Of course, sir," she said. "But the test will grant him his final mark at least." Mildew scowled at her and then reluctantly nodded. She gave a bright smile and walked out, breathing hard, and then looking around for Hiccup, but there was no sign of him. With a shrug, she headed for the door. There was no practice because of the tests and she was exhausted. She was looking forward to going home and hoped Hiccup wouldn't be late. In Alvin's office, Hiccup was sitting stock still in the chair as Alvin prowled around him. The big man closed his hand fiercely over the boy's skinny shoulder and exerted a ferocious pressure. "Where are staying, boy?" he growled. "Somewhere warm," Hiccup replied tightly, grimacing. The pressure was very painful. "Where?" "Lemme see, Burke." Hiccup replied. Alvin increased the pressure and Hiccup gasped. "You really should be thankful I let you stay in the school." Alvin growled. "I should have expelled you." "Why haven't you?" Hiccup grunted in pain. The big man leaned close, his beard tickling Hiccup's cheek. "I'm not telling your mother I kicked you out," he sneered. "You have to quit." "Never happening." Hiccup groaned, feeling his arm grow numb. Alvin stared into the pain-filled face and grinned, and then let the boy go. "It will," he growled. "I may ask Mildew will take you back, because I enjoy the pair of you being miserable." "You're a cruel man, you know that?" Hiccup asked, rubbing his shoulder. He doubted the ornery old man would reverse his decision. Alvin grinned yellowly. "In 2 days, I'll be sitting at home with me wife, eating a ground turkey," he growled, "but you're, well, I doesn't care where you is. You're not welcome, boy, and if you turn up, I'll set Screamer on you. I won't have you back in the house again, boy, I am well shot of you." "What about Mom?" Hiccup asked softly. "She don't wanna see you," Alvin told him crushingly. "I don't wanna see you. Be thankful I ain't got family services to take you away." "We both know why that won't happen," Al Hiccup said, forcing himself to his feet. "Too many marks on me now for them to ignore. Try to get me locked away and I'll return the favor." Alvin's fist slammed across his face and he spun as he collapsed to the ground. "Get up and get out," Alvin shouted. "And be thankful I'm going gently on you." Stumbling up, his head spinning, Hiccup cast him a pained look. "There's nothing to be thankful for," he replied. "Being thrown out of my home, separated from my mother, treated like dirt at school, yeah, why wouldn't I want to have more of that?" Alvin growled and he backed away, diving for the door before the man could change his mind. It was dark outside and very cold, he had missed the buses and there was a long walk ahead of him. "What have I got to be thankful for?" he muttered. Chapter 48, Miss You. Chapter text. Thanksgiving dawned, very cold and bright. There had been another fall of snow overnight but the plows had been out and the roads were clear. Hiccup rolled over in bed, pulled the covers over his head and closed his eyes. He wasn't sure what he should be thankful for and really just wanted to sleep. The door opened and soft steps entered, dropping a mug that smelled of freshly brewed coffee and a plate that smelled of warm buttered toast and scrambled eggs on his bedside chest of drawers. He sighed, flung his arm across his face and rolled back to face Astrid. "Happy Thanksgiving," she smiled and he sighed again. What had he got to be thankful for? His dad dead, his mom estranged, no home, no friends. Except Toothless. And sort of Astrid. And he was being housed with her family when they really owed him nothing except kindness. "Same to you," he said and sat up, running his fingers through his hair and blinking. Astrid was dressed and smiling, looking pleased that he was there. He looked at the breakfast, he had never had breakfast in bed and he grinned. "Did you?" Mom cooked," she admitted. "I'm fine as long as you like it burnt." She looked embarrassed and he couldn't help himself. So, cooking isn't one of your talents either, he teased her, taking a bite of the eggs. They were amazing. He hummed in pleasure. Breakfast was one of those meals he barely got given at home. Don't see you cooking either, she retorted. He shrugged. I can, just don't get the chance. He shrugged. She arched an eyebrow. Believe it when I see it, she smirked. He gave a smile and finished his breakfast. Come on, get up. Let's do something. He stared at her. This was an Astrid he hadn't really seen, a girl not burdened by expectations and worries. He could only assumed even Martin Horferson didn't expect his daughter to work on Thanksgiving, though he guessed that Ingrid Horferson wouldn't let him expect that. What? He asked her, stretching and feeling his neck crack. Let's go for a walk, she said, and he paused, then glanced at the window. What, in daylight? He asked. You could always hide in a bush if anyone I know sees me. She told him wickedly and he groaned. Yes, milady, he sighed, scrambling up. He swiftly showered and changed into his better jeans and a long-sleeved deep red top, then padded downstairs, to see the Horfersons all dressed smartly for the holiday. He instantly felt underdressed, but Ingrid swept forward and hugged him. He stiffened. We know this isn't how you wanted to spend the holiday, but we want you to think of this as your home, she told him gently. He managed a small smile. Thanks, he mumbled, feeling Martin's unfriendly gaze. I really am grateful. What do you want me to do? Ingrid paused. Have fun, she smiled. He looked self-conscious. Really, I gotta do something to earn my keep. He mumbled. If you could lend me a hand preparing the meal, she asked, and Hiccup gave a smile. Now that is something I can do, he said, casting Astrid a smug glance. Unlike my daughter, who can burn water. Ingrid teased her. Astrid flushed. Mom. I'm not that bad. Prove it. Ingrid smiled. Astrid rolled the sleeves of her flowery shirt up. Bring it, she said, her competitive streak coming out. I can beat him any day. Hiccup smiled. You're on. It was the quickest they had ever prepared for the meal, as potatoes, squash, corn, greens, cranberries, ham and turkey were all prepared. Astrid had given up early in the game when she realized Hiccup wasn't joking when he told her he was used to cooking. He had prepared the food swiftly and neatly, and Ingrid had been very grateful. Then Astrid had dragged Hiccup out in his warmest clothes and insisted they walk the dogs. It had been weird but kind of nice as they walked along side by side with the dogs. Stormfly was already very attached to Toothless, and the skinny black dog was bounding along at the limits of his lead, tongue hanging out and tail wagging wildly. Hiccup had maintained a constant conversation with the dog, and Astrid had been in fits of laughter as he talked to the dog like a person. You're weird, you know that, she giggled. He shrugged. May have been noted before, he commented dryly. He kinda likes me talking to him, and hey, why not? She laughed, pulling her scarf tighter. She was in a warm coat with mittens and a hat, while Hiccup managed with his woolen scarf and denim jacket. Aren't you cold? She asked curiously. He shrugged. Well, yeah, but got nothing else to wear, so can't do anything about it. She stared at him and took his free hand in hers, even though the mitten she could feel the cold. Sorry, she murmured, but he smiled. Hey, I'm not frozen to death, and I'd rather be walking here with you than sitting at home, waiting for Elle to get drunk enough to start hitting someone, he admitted matter-of-factly. They were at the park now, so he let Toothless off his leash and the dog bounded away, tail wagging wildly. Stormfly whined and was allowed to go and play with her friend. Astrid stared at him and he found himself blushing at the intense scrutiny. What? He asked self-consciously. You know you're an okay guy, right? She asked him. I thought my name had been changed to Fishbone, or Pest, to be honest, he told her. She blushed. Yeah, sorry, she muttered. He gave a one-shouldered shrug. Look, I understand, he said gently. You're defined by who you are friends with, and who you hate. She flinched. I'm a coward, she sighed. You know the motto of the Horfersons is fearless. But there are things I'm afraid of. Unpopularity, he suggested, leaning against a bench. She nodded. Have you ever done anything you felt so bad about but were scared to own up to? She asked. He paused. I don't feel bad about Lila, he told her defensively, but she shook her head. What if you said something that ended up landing someone in trouble, and you didn't realize until later what you had done, she asked. Especially if you thought you were helping that person. He watched Toothless bounce into a snowdrift and emerge caked in snow. Tricky, he admitted. I guess being honest is all you can do. Then he whistled. I'm gonna try seeing Mom. And I gotta do this alone, you understand? She smiled. Don't be too long, she said, her mittened hand brushing against his. It would be a shame to miss out on the turkey. He grinned and whistled Toothless through his teeth. I'm not missing that, milady, he smiled and rubbed the dog free of snow before arriving out in the opposite direction to Astrid's home. Come on, bud. Let's see if we can say Happy Thanksgiving to Mom. As they walked out of the east side of the park alone, Dager and Savage watched the skinny shape, with the thin black dog both recognized from the garage. Dager turned to Savage. So that's why it came, he growled. It's Hiccup's frickin' dog. What are you gonna do about it? Savage asked as Dager gave a very cold smile. Nothing, he said menacingly. I'll tell my brother, and then leave that to Ozzy. Oh. Alvin spent the day drinking and was sarcastic and nasty about the meal, never hesitating to put the boot in over how disruptive and unpleasant her son was. Valka coughed quietly as she walked to the bathroom, noting a folded piece of paper pushed through the door. Checking that Alvin hadn't seen anything, she swiftly scooped it up and hastened to the bathrooms, bolting the door, and then, with trembling hands, she unfolded it. It was a pencil drawing of Valka, her dead husband Stoic, and a younger Hiccup, all in a family group. They all looked happy and smiling, and Valka felt her vision blur with tears at the sight. She missed her husband. She missed her son. There was writing and a cell phone number on the bottom of the image, which was clearly the work of her talented and brave son. Miss you, Mom. Hope you are keeping well. If you need me, just call and I'll come, no matter what else says. Love you always, Hiccup. Chapter 49, On His Radar. Chapter text. It was bitterly cold and walking every day to the next bus stop was a real chore, but Hiccup kept his word that he would keep his lodging with the Horfusons a secret. Thanksgiving had been far better than he had thought, leaving the message for his mom, which he had watched her pick up, and sharing a meal with Astrid's family. And they had been welcoming and kind, and he had eaten himself almost unconscious. It had been the most amazing meal. But even more interesting, they had given him gifts. He had been thoroughly embarrassed as Astrid had presented him with a beautifully wrapped parcel containing gloves, a woolen hat, a winter coat, a new top, thick jumper and new black jeans. And he had been speechless, wordlessly turning the gloves over in his hands and blinking. Are they okay? Ingrid asked. He stared at them. This is too much, he mumbled. I should pay you for them. These are a gift, Martin told him firmly. And while you stay here, I won't have you freezing to death. Hiccup swallowed. I must owe you something. He murmured warily. Martin sipped his wine thoughtfully. Help out where you can, he said. That will be more than enough. School though was worse than ever. The tests had finished and results came through, and while Astrid was relieved that she had scored highly, Hiccup's astonishingly good results were a source of embarrassment, and he found himself targeted by Dager and his crew as well as the entire football team. He was jostled and slammed aside between each class and used to a blizzard of taunts and abuse. Astrid watched with dismay because he had done what she had hoped, put his head down and worked hard, but she had her own issues. Not a lot of people had been impressed that she had stepped up on Hiccup's behalf. I mean, what were you thinking? Heather asked her over lunch. Using student council pull for Hiccup Haddock. Why waste your effort on that pest? Cammy asked him as Ruff, Anna, Olaf and Damien sat down at her table. Lila was avoiding Astrid, though she and her gang had settled into a role of sending constant bitchy comments at Astrid and her friends. You wanted me to just let Mr. Mildew rip up a student's test paper because he doesn't like the student? Astrid asked her pointedly, opening her can and taking a sip. Well, it's only Hiccup Haddock. Ruff grumbled, but Astrid sighed and poked at her salad. So if Mr. Mildew, or another teacher, doesn't like you, she asked. Do you want to let teachers destroy your work just because they don't like you? It doesn't matter whether it's me or Hiccup, it has to be fair and they have to treat all the students fairly. I supposed you're right, Heather conceded reluctantly. But why did you step in straight away? Because I saw it happening, she retorted. And he didn't deserve it. Why weren't you the first out of the door anyway? Ruff asked, munching on a candy bar. I'd be, and it was a mildew test. Oh, do you like him? Anna asked brightly. Astrid's blue eyes widened. Did she? Sure, he was a good guy and he tended to protect her if there was a problem, and she enjoyed spending time with him, and she couldn't deny her excellent results were down to his help. But did that mean she liked him? She sighed. Of course she did. He was funny and sarcastic and he didn't chase her and annoy her, but there was something about his sparkling emerald eyes and messy auburn hair and his lopsided smile. Of course not, she snapped. I mean he's Hiccup Haddock and I'm Astrid Horferson. Are you crazy? Of course not. Cammy snapped, casting Anna a sharp look. The girl's cheeks warmed in embarrassment, but Astrid saw the tall, skinny shape with the tousled auburn hair walk past in earshot and saw the faintest flinch at her bold pronouncement. She kicked herself and tried to cast him an apologetic look, but he had turned away, shoulders hunched as he walked smack into thuggery. The larger boy immediately threw him back, his foot skidding and slamming him backwards into a table. The audible crack had everyone turning to see Hiccup collapse to the floor, a hand clasped to the back of his head. He curled up, a hand hard on the bump at the point of impact. Look out, Fishbone. Thuggery sneered. Clumsy loser. There was a pause. And yet you couldn't avoid me, what does that make you, Mr. Football Star? Hiccup smirked. Thuggery grabbed him and cocked a fist. Enough. Mr. Grimborn shouted and Thuggery instantly backed down. Well, Mr. Haddock. Causing trouble again? Hiccup painfully stared at him. Not really, though I could if you want me to, he shot back. I've got plenty of ideas how I can. Silence. Mr. Grimborn snarled, grabbing the boy's shoulder. You just can't keep your mouth shut, can you? If I did, you wouldn't have anything to do, would you? Hiccup asked him, grimacing as he was dragged out of the lunchroom. Astrid watched him with dismay, realizing the indirectly, she was responsible. And every time she saw him picked on, saw him unfairly targeted, she felt her innards twist a little more. How much of a coward was she? She was certain of her friends, but Lila would leap on any weakness and use it against her, and with Christmas coming, Astrid wanted everything to run smoothly. There were a couple of big matches coming up and she didn't need dissension in the cheer team, as there surely would be if Lila really used trouble. No matter how bad she felt, Hiccup would have to remain a secret, for now. Astrid was pondering what to do when he appeared in math, much to Mr. Mildew's dismay. Of course, he wouldn't have come unless ordered because he loathed Mildew as much as the old man hated him. Wordlessly, the boy took the remaining seat at the front and drew out his book, as Mildew swaggered up and glared down at the boy. So you're back, then, he sneered. Seems so, Hiccup replied dully. I'm gonna make your life a living hell, boy. Mildew threatened. Oh, I shall enjoy working with you on that, Hiccup replied smoothly. You think your mark gives you some special treatment? Mildew growled. It got me back into your class, Hiccup reminded him. What was it? 99%. You're lucky your paper were marked at all, Mildew hissed. If it were up to me, you'd have been kicked out without it being marked. I bet Alvin told you to mark it, didn't he? He doesn't like me wandering around without a class to go to. It would have been better if your daddy had thrashed you when you were younger. Mildew sneered. Hiccup's fists clenched and he began to breathe heavily. Oh, didn't he like that, did you? You are a vicious old man, Hiccup muttered loud enough for Astrid and everyone else to hear. Mildew leaned forward. What was that? Didn't Daddy teach you manners? He scoffed. He taught me that words are just hot air and shouldn't stop a man doing what he must, Hiccup forced out. His shoulders were rigid, his fists clenched and head down so his emerald eyes inspected the desk. That's detention, Mildew said triumphantly. Thank you, sir. I was expecting that. Hiccup ground out. I mean, it really wouldn't be math without an opportunity to lose part of my evening. Why do you do this class, boy? Mildew sneered. I just adore your winning personality, Hiccup told him with a lopsided smile. I mean, what's not to love? You be as smart as you want, boy. Mildew sneered. You're on me radar now. And the principals. So if you step out of line again, you're gonna regret the day you was born. Hiccup lifted his head, eyes blazing, and he almost seemed on the verge of snapping a reply, but instead, he just gave a wide smile. Why, thank you, sir, he grinned annoyingly. So glad to be popular. And I relish the chance to make your life as miserable as mine. Mildew glared at him, snorted and turned away, tripping over Damien's bag. Righting himself, he pulled himself up to his feet and kicked the bag. Get out of me way, he growled. And you're doing all of chapter 41 for your punishment, Hiccup. See how smart you feel after that. Astrid watched him take a heavy breath and open his book and realized that once more, despite all his efforts, he hadn't earned a chance. He was firmly on every teacher's radar. But seeing Lila laughing at him made Astrid all the more determined to find a way to be his friend, and get him accepted. Chapter 50, Not to You. Chapter text. Astrid was in a thoroughly bad mood as she left school after practice. It was dark and cold and she couldn't believe what had happened. Even Camille stomping alongside her, cursing casually and vowing painful vengeance wasn't lifting her spirits. In fact, it was causing more of a problem as Astrid saw the shape leaning against the wall on the corner. That bitch Savannah. Camille spat. I'll slap her so hard her grandkids will feel it. Look, it's no point you getting into trouble by confronting her. Astrid told her shortly. All that does is put you in the wrong. But they were laughing and high-fiving. Camille growled. And you and Heather were dragging Ruff back. Astrid reminded her. Any of you hitting Savannah makes you as bad as her. That wasn't an accident. Camille exploded. She said it was and the coach believed her, Astrid said angrily, seeing Hiccup glance up and see the two girls. He fished his phone from his pocket and his fingers danced over the screen, his head bowed in concentration. Camille scowled as they walked past. What's he doing here, she snapped. Astrid glanced at him and saw his shoulders stiffen for a second. She shook her head. No matter, she said quickly as they walked past. Look, Camille, I appreciate your anger but I don't want this to get any worse. Lila is targeting me because she's jealous and sore about her party. And maybe I was mean, though she did deserve it. We've just gotta be more careful and make sure we don't get caught like this. But she did it on purpose. I know that. You know that. They know that. But getting mad achieves nothing. We gotta be better than them. Remember who we are. Do you think my going up and punching Savannah will make anything better or give Lila ammunition to bitch more about me? Camille scuffed her boots through the slush on the sidewalk and shrugged. You know you're right, she grumped. Astrid nodded with a small smile. You wanna come home and chill? My dad will be waiting, Astrid sighed. I got Thanksgiving off but I promised to work hard after. I've got a mountain of homework. The smaller blonde paused for a moment, then gave Astrid a firm hug. If you need anything, call me, she said and shook her head as she walked off. Still say I should have punched her lights out. Astrid smiled as she watched her vanish round the corner, then paused, glancing back. Hiccup was nowhere to be seen, and she felt a slight tingle of worry. He had insisted on walking her home since he moved in, finally admitting it was because he was worried about Dager and his gang. She had wondered whether he was putting it on or exaggerating, but she recalled the fear she had felt in Ruff's house and the way the bad boys had reacted to Hiccup's betrayal. It wasn't worth risking it. But as she gazed around, there was no sign of the tall shape and she sighed, hefting her bag over her shoulder and turning back towards the road home. She somehow didn't feel as safe without him. Well. Your friends really don't like me, do they? Hiccup said, vaulting over the wall. She gave a small shriek and backed away, her fists raised. He backed up a pace. Whoa. Friend, sort of. He added hastily. Why did you do that, she asked, glaring at him. Because your friend didn't want me around, he said lightly, though his expression betrayed his hurt. I mean, none of them would help me if I was dying in the street, would they? She stared at him. They're not that bad, she said defensively. They just don't like you because you knocked me over first day of the year and thought it was a laugh. He stared at her. That's it. Yup. They didn't like it. Nor did I. She stared fiercely at him and he rubbed the back of his neck self-consciously. Did I ever apologize? Nope. Oh, he murmured. He squared his shoulders. Okay. Sorry. I mean, it wasn't much fun and I've had a lot worse more or less daily, but that doesn't mean you deserve it. I probably do. Actually, I don't think it's ever justified, she pointed out. He shrugged. Anyway, sorry, he admitted. Wasn't fair. But sometimes, you do stupid things to fit in, especially if you don't have anyone else. He sighed. Now, what was Camille talking about? She seemed mad. Astrid shook her head. It's nothing. She said, looking away, but Hiccup's green eyes narrowed and his hand rose, catching her chin and lifting her head, his warm fingers sliding up to very lightly ghost over the bruise on her left cheek, feeling the swelling and seeing her wince. Looks more than nothing, he murmured. Looks like a punch in the face. Elbow, actually, but she said it was an accident, Astrid mumbled. Camille doesn't think so. Neither do I, he said softly. That's going to leave you with a nasty bruise, maybe a black eye. She pulled away from his gentle touch and nodded. I checked before I came out, she murmured. I guess my parents may be mad. Concealer, he said softly. I'm sure your mom has some. Mine used to use it after her new husband, well, after he'd been drinking and I wasn't around. He turned away and she stared. It was a very soft, very personal confession that raised more questions than it answered, but that she knew she couldn't ask. She sped up to walk alongside him, glancing up at his thoughtful face. What are you thinking about? She asked, searching his face. He gave a small smile. That if Lila and her friends like it rough, I can oblige them, he murmured. You're not going to cover them in green goo again? She asked him, half amused and half flattered that he was taking her injury so seriously. He quirked a half smile. You wound me, he protested. I never repeat. That insults my prank-creating abilities. She cast him a small smile, the first since that elbow had planted firmly in her face. You know, someone will guess it was you, she warned him. You could get in trouble. Sorry, have you forgotten who you are talking to? He asked her snarkily. Hiccup Haddock. I could sit quietly in the library all day and I'd still be the first one blamed for any trouble. Hey, I just don't want you in trouble, she protested, her tone a little irritable. He walked silently for a few yards then sighed. Sorry, Astrid, he murmured. I just don't like you being hurt, not in a creepy way, obviously, but more in a your mother told me to look out for you way. She ground to a halt and stared at him, her fair brows dipping under her woolly hat. What? Her tone was freezing and he snapped round to face her, his green eyes wary. Your mom may have asked me to keep an eye out for you in payment of staying, he said urgently. So you're spying on me, she roared. He backed up another pace. No, he gabbled. Astrid, no. What have you told her? She snapped. A horrible thought struck her. Does she know about the party? No, he protested. Odin, I would never tell her. I promised. And you always keep your word, she accused him. He took a slow breath and nodded. Always, he said firmly. She met the sparkling green gaze with her own accusing one, and saw determination but also hurt in the eyes. Astrid, I promised I would look out for you. That means I try to stop you getting hurt. It means I care for you. It means if someone gets blamed for paying back Savannah or Lila, then it's me, not you. She paused and stared at him, shocked at the quiet admission. Are you serious? She asked. He paused and nodded, unable to meet her eye. Look, I owe you my life and the home I have with your family, he admitted in a shamed voice. I promised my dad I would look out for Mom, and I did, until Elle threw me out. No matter what he did to me, no matter how much I hated him, I stayed, because I had promised. And I let my dad down when he threw me out because I couldn't protect her anymore. He took a shuddering breath, and then felt a mittened hand grasp his. He started and stared down into her face. I am sorry, she said, gripping tighter. I misjudged you. Nothing new there, he muttered. He tried to pull away, but she gripped his hand tighter. No, she said urgently, pulling him back. Look, you're right. You have looked out for me, but I'm 18. I mean, why would I want my mom looking over my shoulder the whole time? I never did that, he protested softly. I've got some pride left. I don't tell her anything, she just wanted me to protect you, I think. He sighed. Yeah, I guess I'm in trouble now. I know you don't need my protection, Astrid. I know you can't speak to me or acknowledge I exist, and I understand that, I really do, but when you're not at school, you're kind and funny and you treat me like a person, and I will always be grateful for that. He turned away, his hand still trapped by her fierce grasp. I like you, he murmured. I'm sorry, but I do. He tried to pull away, but she jerked him back. You what? She demanded. He turned back with a lopsided, bitter smile. Don't worry, I know it's impossible, he said quietly. Just, please, treat me like a person out of school. I don't think I could manage if no one treated me like a human being. Hiccup, I kind of like you too, she admitted. I mean, sure, you're skinny and sarcastic and stubborn. Hey, those are my good qualities, he protested. She gave a small smile. But you're also brave and kind and clever, and you do protect me. She told him. And there goes my rep, he sighed, allowing himself to be pulled closer to her and look into her face. He gently raised his hand to her wound and frowned slightly. I am your friend, Astrid. I know I'm nothing at school. But please believe me when I say I hate seeing you hurt. Me too, she admitted. I'd be worried if you liked seeing you hurt. He teased her gently. She lightly punched his shoulder. Ow. Why do I think you need any sort of protection, he protested. Idiot. I meant I hate seeing you hurt. Me too, he smirked and ducked another swat at him. Getting worried over here, to be honest, he added. She smiled and saw him relax. It's okay, she sighed. He stroked her face just once, very gently, then pulled back, still holding her hand as they turned towards her home. No, he told her gently. It doesn't matter what happens to me, if I get tripped or hit or thrown aside. But if must happen, it should be to me, not to you. Chapter 51, Planner. Chapter text. Astrid's eye had come up in a lovely bruise that she had managed to conceal with Hiccup's advice. She had been saddened that he knew so much about hiding bruises and wondered absently how many he had been forced to hide. He had been very quiet that evening, musing on what they had discussed and planning something. She had asked him if he could help her with her math, and he had patiently sat down, revising the latest set of equations Mildew had given them. Hiccup, of course, had spent all detention struggling with math, so he was ahead of the game. Astrid smiled that Mildew hadn't considered that all the extra math he had given the boy had forced him to practice and learn better than anyone in the class. It still didn't make the lessons any more fun. Are you going to do anything to Savannah? She asked Hiccup as she frowned and attempted a problem unsuccessfully. He frowned and circled the area she hadn't worked out correctly. I think something must be done, he said thoughtfully. Not slime. I reserve my right, he smirked and then burst out laughing. Only as last resort, because they will guess it's me. I know Mr. Treacher is suspicious, especially as he ended up slimed and on his back, but he's got no proof. Just be careful, she advised him. I meant what I said. Me too, he reminded her gently. Which is why vengeance will be mine. Ours. Sorry, ours. She punched his shoulder. Ow. Astrid, I could just let you punch her out, that would finish her off. Not my style, she reminded him. He rubbed his shoulder with a pout. Except with me, he grimaced. I guess I'll be going to Planner. Planner? For anarchy. He grinned. She put her fingers in her ears. La 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 la. Not listening, she said as he grinned and leaned to call into her ear, as Martin walked by and paused. Hiccup glanced up, and drew back as if shot, a flash of anxiety filling his emerald eyes. He stared at the rug, head down as Martin glared, and then continued on his way. Astrid stared at him and then after her father and sighed. She knew her dad was seriously overprotective, but Hiccup's reaction disturbed her. He was only teasing and she had been enjoying having a few minutes of fun during her work. It had lightened the mood and she smiled, then turned back to her work. Over the next couple of days, school had been awkward. Somehow, word had gotten out that Astrid had been so clumsy she had gotten a black eye during cheerleading practice and she was fuming at the lie. Her friends had countered the rumor, but somehow everyone was pointing at her and laughing, and it took every ounce of her strength to control her temper. But she could see Lila boasting to her junior year admirers that she should be cheer captain because she was graceful, reliable and far the best in the school. Hiccup had remained in the shadows, though he watched and used his phone to take pictures of the girls in question, plus one or two others, but always ducking away when noticed. Astrid was getting more and more uncomfortable that her friends had such a downer on Hiccup, but she had no way of knowing how to tell them that he was her friend, let alone that he lived at her house. But she knew she had to find a way. Hiccup paused for a long moment as he twirled his pen while he sat at the back of physics class. Mr. Mulch, the small round physics teacher, was explaining about fluid and gas mechanics and the boy was bored. He had needed to understand this in detail in repairing engines, so he had read up the relevant sections in his texts the previous year, so when he was picked out first, as always happened, he answered the question correctly. Mulch gave a cheery smile. "Well done, Mr. Haddock," he grinned. "It seems to be a good day for fluid mechanics." "It's always a good day for fluid mechanics," Hiccup mumbled, unable to help himself. It was almost Mulch's refrain, and the little man gave a brief frown and then nodded. "Glad you appreciate my humor," he said, and turned to the next boy. Once everyone had answered a problem, the class was set a series of problems and Hiccup turned back to his, sighing. He read the first and began to write. "Peast." He looked up, and met Fishlegs's round blue eyes. He groaned. "What?" he hissed. The husky boy looked offended. "I'm stuck on 3, he hissed. "Can't you ask Mulch?" Hiccup asked, glancing at the questions and frowning. It seemed straightforward to him. "You know, he just talks and never answers. Why doesn't the equation work? You have to convert the gas to standard temperature and pressure first." "Oh, Thor. How did I miss that?" Fishlegs said and grinned. "Thanks, Hiccup." You're welcome." He mumbled and stared. He was even more confused than usual. Fishlegs ignored him with the rest of the team, except those who actively hunted him. And then there had been the fight where the boy had been trying to beat him up. Why had he helped Fishlegs? Then he blinked. It was instinctive reaction. And the boy had been grateful. He sighed. Maybe another 10 years and Fish might feel able to talk to Hiccup openly. As soon as the bell rang, he handed in his book and sped out. He had work to do before he could snatch some lunch, not that he looked forward to the experience. Still, he slipped into history and carefully painted over the chalk with correction fluid, then headed for the girls' locker room. Locking the main door, he located the lockers he needed and swiftly opened them. It would only take a few minutes. He arrived late at lunch when the line was all but gone, and he grabbed himself some pizza and fries, walking quietly to a table at the far side of the canteen. He urgently bit into his pizza, reviewing his plan and toying with his fries, stealing a glance at Astrid, who was blanking him as usual. Of course she couldn't be seen talking to him, but sometimes, he wanted to shout at her friends that he had as much right to be here as everyone else, though he knew the trouble it would cause. And he wasn't surprised though, when Snotlout and Irette grabbed his tray and tossed it aside. He sighed. "What now, muscleheads?" he asked wearily. He was hungry and his stomach was growling. "I hear you were seen hanging around the girls' changing rooms," Snotlout sneered. If that was true, that would mean you were hanging around the girls' changing rooms as well," he pointed out. Snotlout opened his mouth and he stared wordlessly. "You shut up," he growled eventually. Irette grabbed Hiccup's shoulder and grinned. "Stay away from the cheerleaders, or we'll make you pay," he growled. "We know who slimed Lila." Hiccup gave a bright smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said amiably. "We know your trouble," he sneered. "I know all about you." Hiccup's eyes darkened. "Yeah, Gobber can't keep a secret to save his life," he muttered. Irette shoved him backwards. "Any trouble and you'll be sorry," he threatened with a final shove. Hiccup stared at his scattered lunch. "No what?" "Permanently he sighed. History was after lunch and everyone filed in well ahead of the final bell except Hiccup, who sauntered in on the bell, then tripped and sprawled over Savannah's desk. He gave his lopsided grin. "Hello, gorgeous," he leered, and she pulled a face. "Ugh. I need a shower," she choked. Mr. Grimborn grabbed the back of Hiccup's collar and hauled him back. "Back to your seat, Mr. Haddock, before I feel you would be better visiting Mr. Treacher than the glorious Viking era," he growled, throwing the boy sideways. Unbalanced, Hiccup slammed sideways into a desk and clutched at his bruised side. "Thank you, sir," he groaned and slid into his seat. Lila smirked at his discomfort and nodded to Savannah as Mr. Grimborn turned to the front of the class and began talking. Everyone listened carefully, even though Viking trade routes were very dull because he was clearly in a bad mood, but when he turned to make notes on the board, nothing happened. He frowned and tried again. But the chalk wouldn't write. The students stared at one another in agony. Everyone wanted to laugh, but they all know it would be fatal because Mr. Grimborn was turning scarlet with rage, his famed controlled faked cracking. Hiccup bit his wrist to stop himself laughing as the man tried another chalk and finally roared in rage, throwing the chalk across the classroom. "Turn out your bags," he shouted, and the students hastily grabbed their bags and began to empty them out. Hiccup watched very closely, as Savannah let out a piercing scream. A huge spider raced across the desk from her bag and she backed away, eyes wide. The teacher instantly turned on her, about to speak when the correction fluid rolled out as well. He snatched it and glared at the girl. "And what is this?" he growled. "I've never seen that before," she protested. Mr. Grimborn retrieved a piece of chalk and looked very closely at it, seeing the faint brush marks of correction fluid. He smiled. "And yet here we are," he said calmly. "I think we need to discuss this after class, Miss Svensson." Everyone quietened down and the lesson continued, but Astrid frowned as Hiccup grinned. He stared at her and winked as they rose and left, him for detention and her for practice. In the locker room, the cheerleading team were chattering as they entered, mainly sympathizing with Savannah, who had clearly been framed, mainly because everyone agreed she just wasn't smart enough to think of that prank, though it had wasted half the lesson. But as they opened their lockers, an avalanche of pictures fell on them, showing Savannah with a variety of boys in close embraces. Irret, Snotlout, Tough Nut, Fish Legs, Dager, Thuggery, Savage, Maggots, Dog's Breath, even Roland, the chunky class loser. Astrid picked up one of Savannah and Dager and grinned. Cammy turned round one of Savannah and Dog's Breath and roared with laughter. "Such a sweet couple," she scoffed, and Lila gave a scream, then lunged at her. "Gimme that," she screamed. Cammy threw it at her with a grin. "I prefer this one," she laughed, waving one of Savannah kissing Roland on the cheek. Then their phones all beeped. Laughing at Lila trying to collect up the hundreds of pictures, Astrid checked her phone and opened the new notification. Lila's homepage had pictures of Savannah getting into trouble and all the pictures of Savannah with every boy in the year. "So stupid she'll do anything I ask and even go out with Roland." Astrid read aloud, turning her screen round to show the others. "What did you say?" Savannah shouted from the door. Astrid turned her phone round to display the page. Savannah took it all in and then turned to Lila. "How could you?" she screamed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Lila protested, not having seen the notification. Savannah marched up to her, holding Astrid's phone, and showed her. Lila's jaw dropped. "Come on, save you know I wouldn't," she protested as Astrid rescued her phone. "I hit Astrid Horferson for you and you humiliate me," Savannah screamed. "You bitch." And then she lunged at Lila. The two went down with a crash on a pile of Savannah with pictures. Ruff was chanting "Fight! Fight! Fight!" and Heather and Cammy were unhelpfully encouraging Savannah to kill Lila. The rest of the team were all laughing as Coach Thora Bergstrom entered. Taking in the scene in a quarter of a second, she lunged forward and dragged the two girls apart. "What is going on here?" she bellowed. She was a huge hairy woman with a big nose and massive arms. Savannah just admitted to hitting Astrid on purpose on Lila's instructions before they started fighting. Heather reported and everyone else nodded. The coach looked over at her captain and nodded. I misjudged you, Miss Horferson, she said calmly. You have my apologies. I should have known that with your balance and accuracy, you would not be the one at fault for Monday's incident. Astrid gave a small smile. It's okay, she said graciously as the coach turned her eye to the two girls in her hands. However, I won't have disruptive elements in my team, she announced loudly. It's clear you two have your own agenda, and when it involves injuring another member of my team for your own silly games, then I won't have it. Lila, Savannah, you're off the team. Leave. You can't. Lila protested. I'm far and away the best. Miss Dagmar, you aren't even sixth best on the team. Coach Bergstrom told her. And Savannah Svensson can barely recall the routines anyway. I think we'll be better off without you. Reserves time to step up. She glared at the two girls. Why are you still here? She asked coldly. Leave. Astrid turned away as they left, knowing they would be glaring at her. And though she had nothing to do with the way things turned out, she guessed she knew a boy who did. Oh. Walking home after practice, she looked at Hiccup quietly for about half a street before being unable to wait any longer. Okay, Spill, she demanded. How the hell did you do it? He glanced up at her and a small smirk lifted his mouth. You mean how did I ensure Savannah was detained in class before practice, how I doctored pictures from her website with almost every guy in the year, including Roland, who is actually a nice guy when you get to know him, by the way, and how I sneaked them into the locker room to distract everyone and then hacked Lila's homepage so that Savannah, who isn't very bright, would blow up and let it slip what she had done, he asked. She nodded dumbly. What can I say? I needed to make her so pissed that she'd say something stupid, and I've always wanted to try the correction fluid gag. You know they'll figure out it was you eventually, she asked him after they walked silently for another few yards. Lila will be too busy trying to save face in front of her cronies, and Savannah will spend the next week realizing she doesn't have any friends, and then the next month trying to make it up to Lila. Hiccup told her smugly. But you hacked her homepage, Astrid said in surprise. Thought you. Just because I couldn't afford a phone doesn't mean I can't use a computer, and Lila and Savannah aren't bright, he admitted. Their passwords were pretty basic. I mean, who still uses password as your password? Astrid stared and started laughing. No way. Way, he chuckled. Savannah used her name and she spelled it wrongly. Oh my gods. Astrid giggled and then she sobered up a little. That was a lot of trouble to go to just to pay them for elbowing me, she said seriously. He gave a shrug. Even the twins couldn't have thought of that one. Hey, if you're comparing me to the twins, I'm in trouble, he protested, but she grabbed his hand. You're a good friend, she murmured. His mouth lifted in a smile and his emerald eyes twinkled. You know, I'd just settle for friend, he admitted. She smiled back and then groaned as she remembered what had happened. You do realize we're gonna have to work twice as hard to get up to speed for the Visithug match, she sighed. I have complete faith in you, he said gently as she slid her arm through his. I'm sure you'll be great. She snuggled against him, smiling at his faith. Thanks, she said as they headed home. My hero. Chapter 52, Spiked. Chapter text. It had been another successful game for the Berk Vikings, a handsome win over the Visithugs Thunder in front of half the town, and now the post-match celebration was progressing in true Berk fashion with a large bonfire, barbecue and drinks. Music was playing and the players, cheerleaders and supporters were all mingling with good-natured banter and lots of showing off. Hiccup watched guardedly. Alvin was on the prowl, which automatically had him on edge. He knew the principal wouldn't do anything with so many people around, but the knowledge the man could pop up at any moment put a damper on the event. The fact most of the school still treated him like an outcast meant he wasn't enjoying the celebration that much, but he still cast around to check Astrid was alright. His promise to Ingrid was still fresh in his mind and he took a sip from his fruit punch, non-alcoholic because they're all underage. And then he frowned. She was sitting on a bench by the opposing quarterback, a huge buff guy called Jason, who was laughing and joking with her. And then he frowned. Astrid was giggling, her head drooping, and she was leaning towards Jason, who was pretty obviously feeling her up. He took a small step closer, his brows dipping in concern. Astrid's movements were very uncoordinated, her smile almost drunk. And then he paused and stared accusingly at his punch, taking a small sip and grimacing. Spiked. And Astrid was completely drunk. He cast around for her friends and located Cammy and Heather not far away, chatting with two other cheerleaders. He cast a small worried look at Astrid, who was leaning towards Jason, giggling as his hand slid up her leg, then marched determinedly over to the girls. Both Heather and Cammy, unsurprisingly, scowled and glared at him. He rolled his eyes. "Don't drink the punch," he said shortly. "It's spiked." They stared at him in shock and then accusingly. "And it wasn't me before you ask." Never even considered that, Cammy lied. Hiccup rolled his eyes. "Look, I can tell, and if you don't believe me, look at Astrid. She's off her head." Cammy frowned and was about to open her mouth, but Heather swatted her arm and pointed. "You sure?" she asked. "She could just be into him." Really into him," Cammy murmured, seeing the girl giggling and resting against him. "Look, you know her better than I do, but that doesn't look like Astrid Horferson," Hiccup said urgently. "And I can tell you now that guy is into her, and is going to take it further." They glared at him. "What? I'm a guy. We're all bastards, right?" He threw his paper cup to the floor. "Warn the others not to drink the punch and get the players. I'll stop him doing anything to her." Cammy frowned. "What do you think you're?" she began, but Hiccup turned to Heather. "Look, do you want anything to happen to her?" he asked pointedly. "'Cause it's going to if no one does anything." And then he turned away and marched towards Astrid. She was giggling and leaning towards Jason, his hands all over her. There were most of the Visithug team nearby and no sign of the Burke team, so Hiccup guessed he was probably on his own. Nothing new there, he thought grimly. In fact, the quarterback seemed to be on the verge on standing up, suggesting Astrid came with him somewhere more private, and Hiccup realized that the guy knew she was drunk. He was probably in on it, he guessed. And that got him to speed up, his tall shape accelerating forward and grabbing Astrid's arm. "There you are, milady," he said pleasantly. "I was wondering where you'd got to. Time to go, I think." Her dazed blue eyes swung up and she giggled. "Hiccup," she giggled. "I'm fine." He gave a small smile. "Not quite, milady," he said gently. "The girls are looking for you." "Back off, toothpick." Jason growled, glaring at him. "Can't you see the lady wants to be with me?" Hiccup gave a small smile. "Not sure she wants to do anything at the moment," he told the bigger boy. "She's very drunk and I think it's time she went home." "The lady wants to stay." Jason growled, rising to his feet. Hiccup pulled Astrid towards him, his gentle grasp steadying her. "Cammy and Heather are worried about you," he said gently. "You need to get back, Astrid." "But I'm having fun." She whined. "Not with him," he said softly. "I don't think you really want this." "Not now. Not this way. I think the lady has made her decision." Jason growled as Hiccup pulled Astrid up and away from him. "I know her better than you," he said softly. "Was it you spiked the punch or your teammates?" Jason's big fist sponged and he loomed over Hiccup. Just his luck, the guy was a couple of inches taller but 3 times as wide as he was. Automatically, he pushed Astrid behind him, backing her away a step. She was unsteady on her feet, still giggling and gripping at him. "I didn't know you had it in you," she giggled. "My hero." "Walk away." Jason growled. Hiccup shook his head, his green eyes darting to find anyone who could help. And it looked like he was alone, with only Visithugs surrounding him. "Can't do that," he said. "I mean, are you so hopeless you have to drug girls to get them to talk to you?" "I knew Visithugs were lame, but this is totally pathetic." The punch that crashed into his face had him staggering back, stumbling, but he managed to keep on his feet and remain between Jason and Astrid. "How's that for pathetic?" the quarterback sneered. "I've had better," Hiccup managed thickly. "Gods, no wonder you guys were whipped. You punch like a girl." The second punch did knock him to the ground and Astrid collapsed behind him, disorientated and mumbling. It was pretty obvious she was out of it, and though his head was spinning, he stumbled up, grabbing her and pulling her away from the raging football player. "Get away from my girl!" Jason snapped. "Really?" Hiccup managed. "Your girl. If she was yours, she'd be protesting, but as she's stoned by whatever you put in that drink, she can't say anything. Doesn't that ring any alarm bells? She's really into me, and I'm happy to take what consolation I can get. Astrid isn't second prize. Hiccup snapped, his eyes glittering in anger at the attitude, and he threw a punch of his own, the hit snapping Jason's head back and not much else. Oops, he mouthed. That was a mistake. Jason growled and signaled to his friends. Hiccup staggered back, pushing Astrid away from the quarterback before two players grabbed his arms and he struggled. Jason swaggered up. And I'll enjoy making you pay for it. Kinda broke now, maybe if you come back in the spring. Hiccup suggested, watching the man pull back his fist, and he lashed out with his leg, catching the other boy in the midriff. Jason groaned, his eyes crossing, and he staggered back, before stumbling up, his face scarlet with rage. The punch that slammed into Hiccup's face had his vision smeared with stars, and the second slammed him to the floor. A couple of fierce kicks to his chest were accompanied by audible cracks, and suddenly there was horrible pain on breathing. The boot that slammed into his back actually lifted him a couple of feet off the ground. Then someone grabbed a handful of hair and he was dragged up, a fist to the face swiftly dumping him back on the ground. He rolled, staring at the blinking Astrid. Go, he groaned as she frowned, shaking her head. She still seemed disorientated. There was a blur, and with relief, he saw Cammy, Heather and Ruff grab her and drag her away. But that didn't solve his problem, as two of the Visithugs dragged him up again for Jason to continue battering his sagging shape. He sagged, blood dripping from his nose, and as his head was dragged up again, he blinked and realized he was on his own. And then there were shouts and he saw movement. The grips on his arms vanished and the ground loomed up to meet him. He collapsed and saw legs around him, heard the sounds of shouts and punches, and then hands grabbed him again. He cringed, flinching as he saw movement, until he realized he was being held up by Snotlout and Tough Nut. The Visithugs were backing away, insults being traded between the two teams as Hiccup felt himself pulled back. Cammy was screaming abuse, and half the junior team were in support of the whole senior team except Dager and Savage, who had bailed earlier. Blearily, he lifted his head. I was just wearing his fists out my face before making my move. He mumbled. Snotlout peered at the auburn-haired boy, watching his legs buckle and taking his weight. Sure, he said. Why'd you tackle him alone, man? Tough Nut asked him pointedly. It took 3 of us to bring him down on the field. Boy, wish I'd been paying attention. Hiccup grumbled. Wasn't really watching, but would have taken too long for Astrid. Snotlout looked at him. I owe you one, for saving my princess, he said brashly. Not why our princess, Hiccup mumbled as Alvin stormed up, seeing the two teams squaring up to one another. What is going on here, he bellowed. Then his gaze fell on Hiccup and his face hardened. I might have known you would be in the middle of any trouble, boy. He sneered. There was a pause and the football team stared at him in surprise. Sir, the punch was spiked. Heather began and Alvin lunged forward, grabbing Hiccup by the arm. You little bastard, he roared. How dare you? The boy cringed, his battered face twisting in a whine of pain. I didn't tell. But glad you thought of me. He mumbled weakly. I'll expel you for this, he shouted, shaking the boy viciously, but Fishlegs shook his head. Sir, Hiccup was not to blame, he protested clearly. Gustav saw the Visithug running back, Norbert pouring vodka in the fruit punch. A lot of vodka. Hiccup was just the first one to realize and warn us. And he stepped up to get Astrid back before something happened to her, Ruff added, seeing the principal's face twist in a look of hatred as he inspected the skinny auburn-haired boy. He paused, then shoved the boy back against the football players and stormed away, going off to harangue the opposing team's coach. Irette stared after him, then at the sagging shape. He really doesn't like you, he commented. Hiccup managed the faintest hint of a smile. Nah, he loves me really, he mumbled. Just can't bring himself to show it. He tried to take a step and his legs completely collapsed. Wow, why's the world spinning, he groaned, blinking blearily. Snotlout sighed and dragged him to his feet. Where can we take you, he asked with a sigh. The mood had kind of gone and the knowledge the other team had been trying to get their cheerleaders drunk had put them all on edge. Hiccup winced. My home, Astrid slurred, blinking drunkenly. My mom knows his, she'll get him home. Heather stared at her suspiciously, but Astrid just burst into laughter and hung on to her helplessly as Hiccup almost had to be dragged to Snotlout's SUV. The boy sighed. I don't suppose you wanna stay with me, princess, he offered and almost melted under the ferocious glare the other girls gave him. Astrid just giggled. Oh Snotfist, she laughed with drunken tactlessness. You know I can't stand you. I've got my hero right here. And she pointed shakily at Hiccup, then passed out. Snotlout half dragged the beaten boy back to his car and sighed, seeing his eyes flutter closed as well. Some hero. Chapter 53, Secret Revealed. Chapter text. He was curled in his bed, head buried in the pillow when the drapes were thrown open as the Hofersons tended to do to wake up Astrid. He burrowed further down, his eyes screwed shut and head pounding, wishing they would leave him alone for once. But the heavy steps got closer and he wearily raised his aching head, various parts of him beginning to ache as he moved. We need to talk, Martin Hoferson said. He tensed. Astrid's father had never really wanted him here and had only tolerated Hiccup because of the determined championing of his wife and daughter. Wincing, he shoved himself to a very hesitant sitting position, his hair wild and sticking out in all directions and his face bruised and battered. He yawned and stretched, his back crackling, and then he whimpered in pain as he pulled on his cracked ribs. Grimacing, he pressed a hand to his battered chest and raised his pained green eyes. Whatever you want, sir, he groaned. Martin stared at him. You've been fighting, he accused Hiccup, and the boy winced. Not much fighting, he admitted. More like being held and punched. A lot. And my daughter comes back drunken and vomiting, he accused the boy. Hiccup grimaced. Not my doing, he groaned. The punch was spiked, the other team, they were trying to get off with Astrid and the other cheerleaders. I tried to stop the guy who was talking to drunken Astrid. Drunken Astrid? Martin asked in a cold voice. Yeah, like normal Astrid, but gigglier and not able to walk in a straight line, Hiccup explained thickly. Also less good at running away when asked to. Might have got away without all of this if she could have run. You're trying to tell me you were trying to help my daughter? Martin accused him, and Hiccup lifted his head, his green gaze filled with hurt. Is that so hard to believe? He asked softly, his voice suddenly husky. I mean, she literally saved my life when I was freezing to death. She gave me somewhere to stay and friendship, even if she has to pretend she doesn't know me or despises me at school. He swallowed. And your wife asked me to look out for Astrid, to make sure she didn't get hurt, in payment for staying. So I did. Martin stared at the boy, whose eyes were furiously inspecting the quilt. But you weren't her friend, were you? He challenged the boy. You were a troublemaker, a boy whose grades are shocking and disciplinary record is worse. Shoulders hunched, Hiccup looked up despondently. Here it was, he could hear the axe swishing before it fell, and the magical sense of security he had garnered here was about to be taken from him, when he had done everything asked of him. His grades had even improved. Yes, sir, he sighed painfully. I know you wouldn't believe the reasons why I am how I am. I just never get a break. Martin stood in front of him, and then stuck his hand out. Hiccup stared at him and gaped. Sir, he murmured as the man's hand closed around his. I misjudged you, Martin said briskly. I thought you were going to harm my daughter, but instead, you protected her. Hiccup felt the hand shake his and he winced, cushioning his cracked ribs. I promised, he mumbled, looking embarrassed. Martin gave the boy a smile. So tell me what happened, he said more understandingly and perched on the edge of the bed. Oh. Astrid awoke with a thundering headache and a throat like sandpaper. She could hear her mother walk around like a herd of elephants and whined in pain. Ingrid pulled the curtains back and Astrid blinked owlishly, the room still spinning slightly. Morning, Astrid, her mother said cheerfully, and she groaned. Mom. She moaned, pressing her eyes closed against the harsh light. What happened? Ingrid frowned at her and sat on the edge of the bed. Can't you remember? She asked calmly. There was a pause and Astrid swiped her face with her hand, frowning. Could she? She forced her mind back through the fog and recalled the celebration after the game, laughing and joking with the girls, and the opposing quarterback, who chivalrously got her a couple of glasses of fruit punch. She recalled demonstrating the full Viking routine to him and getting hot and sweaty, and downing both cups straight away. He got her another 2 cups of fruit punch and she recalled feeling a bit muzzy after she drank them. But he had been funny and interesting and very, very touchy. Her brow furrowed. He had been pawing her very personally, but she had thought it was hilarious. Why had she thought that? Usually she would have punched him, and then she remembered someone coming and fetching her, being gently pulled to her feet. He had been kind and calm and had tried to get her away, his green eyes kind and concerned and hiccup. Her rescuer had been hiccup. Then she had fallen down and she remembered being pulled away by the girls and not a lot more. I think something happened at the post-game celebration, she mumbled. The other team's quarterback was a bit handsy, and I think Hiccup sort of rescued me, but I can't remember much more. Your punch was spiked and you were very drunk, Astrid, her mother told her, and the girl groaned. Now her parents would never let her out to anything. But Hiccup did come to your aid. I think he got hurt helping you. Seeing the bout shape, held up by 2 of the larger players, the big quarterback pounding his fists into the skinny shape, his face no longer handsome but ugly with rage. Jason. Astrid murmured, wincing. He was really mad. You were both dropped off here, at least you remembered to bring him back here. Ingrid smiled as the doorbell rang. Astrid frowned. Your friends were really worried, I'll be surprised if that isn't them now. She got up and went downstairs to let them in as Astrid ran her hands through her hair and groaned, pulling it out of the braid and then rebraiding it rapidly as she heard steps race up the stairs and her friends burst into her bedroom. Ast. Cammy shrieked. Shush. Heather hushed her, seeing the girl wince. Why? Asked Ruff, equally loudly. Head exploding here, Astrid complained. Hungover. Cammy grinned, high-fiving Ruff. Gods, why does everyone think getting drunk is such fun? Astrid complained. This is not fun. Drinking's fun, afterwards, not so much, Ruff commented with an evil grin. And you were totes wasted. Astrid scowled at her. How? Punch was spiked by the other team. Heather explained. Fishlegs spoke to Gustav, who saw their running back do it. Here, you look thirsty, drink this, it'll make you feel better. He knew. Astrid scowled. That 2-faced rancid-breathed son of a half-troll. Then she paused. How did I get away? She murmured. Heather rolled her eyes. Don't you remember anything? Heather asked. Like who your rescuer was? Cammy asked slyly. Your hero. Ruff teased her. Astrid rubbed her head. No, she lied hopefully. Snotlout. Irret. As if those guys were chatting up their cheerleaders. No. You were saved by Hiccup Haddock. Heather told her in astonishment. Weird, huh? Yeah. Astrid said, flicking her gaze up to see her mom at the door. Ingrid rolled her eyes and turned away, shaking her head. She understood popularity but had always reminded her daughter, Horfusons fear nothing. Except unpopularity. Honestly, he told us the punch was spiked and then he raced over to drag you away from their quarterback, because you looked like you were about to go off and, well, you know. No, I don't. Astrid said irritably. How come you guys didn't notice? Cammy shrugged. Their linebacker was pretty hot, she admitted. He gave us drinks but we were giggling so much we never got round to drinking them. And Ruff and Cammy threw theirs at each other, Heather said cheerfully. So Hiccup saved me? Astrid asked. The Visithugs were really mad, Ruff admitted. I shouted for Tough and the guys when we grabbed you, but they were really giving him a kicking. Astrid chewed her lip in embarrassment, swiping her bangs off her face. Her cheeks felt hot. Are you blushing? Heather asked her. Not. R2. You look like a tomato. Ruff grinned. Don't you remember? You called him your hero. Oh gods. Did not. And you told Snotlout you couldn't stand him. Heather added, smirking. Oh, she would never hear the end of that. That shouldn't be a surprise. Astrid mumbled. Been saying that since freshman year. But I think he sort of believed you this time. Heather added. Oh gods. But he drove us all back here anyway, Cammy added. You said your mom would get Hiccup home, and once you were in, Snot took us home as well. Astrid stared at her hands and sighed. There's something about that you ought to know. She mumbled. He kind of stayed here. Heather stared at her. What? Your mom let Hiccup Haddock stay the night. And he didn't wreck the place. Come on, Ruff hardly likely to when he was all but out of it after that beating. Cammy muttered. Sorry, we are talking about Hiccup Haddock, Ruff reminded her. He can cause trouble just by being somewhere. Well about that. Astrid mumbled and then sighed, lifting her head and swallowing. This was it, moment of truth. How good were her friends? He lives here. They stared at her, and then they all burst out laughing. Good one, asked. Cammy giggled. Come on. You can't expect us to believe that. Ruff scoffed. The class pest here. At your home. Your mom and dad would never allow it. Heather reminded her. Joking. Not joking. Astrid snapped, her eyes flashing. Joking. Heather insisted with a grin. You'd have told us before now. Yeah, we're your besties, remember? Ruff winked. And then a figure limped by on the way to the bathroom, tall and skinny with wild auburn hair, his battered face downcast and a hand resting lightly against his bruised chest. The girls stared up in shock. He was barefoot, his loose training pants scruffy and frayed, faded t-shirt hanging from his body. He had clearly slept here in his own clothes. Hiccup looked up as sudden silence met his appearance as he passed Astrid's room. His green eyes widened in shock and he managed a very self-conscious smile to the four girls staring at him, three with jaws hanging slack in utter shock. Hi, he mumbled and waved before limping on by. And every eye turned to Astrid. Heather leaned closer. Okay, she said. Spill. Chapter 54, Spill. Chapter text. Astrid faced Heather and winced, her head pounding, but she had known this moment was coming. Heather was frowning, Cammy was scowling and Ruff was grinning lazily, twirling her braids and inspecting the hungover girl. Astrid, I'd never had thought you had it in you, young lady, she teased. Astrid gave a huge groan. Ruff, she sighed. No, it's awesome, the female twin grinned. I mean, Miss Goody Two Shoes has a boy the class pest, no less, as her lodger. Who'd have thought it? You have a boy living with you too. Cammy pointed out. Ruff instantly pulled a face. Yeah, my girly brother hardly counts, she protested, pulling a face. And he's been living with me since before I was born. So when you go to college, you'll be moving away from him. Ruff pulled a face. No, that would be weird, she said instantly as the girls all smiled. No matter how much Ruff complained about her brother, the truth was they were inseparable and would do anything for each other. Ruff without Tough was unthinkable. But you don't have that excuse, Miss Class President. Fine. Astrid huffed, sitting cross-legged, flicking her braid over her left shoulder and chewing her lip in thought. But girls, this is not gossip, okay? This is private. You like him? Kame jumped in. I'm serious, Astrid said sternly. This isn't a laughing matter. Heather nodded, seeing the determination in Astrid's eyes. What's up, she asked. Why is he here? Because, he asked me, Astrid said lamely. The girls looked at her and began laughing. What is so funny? Astrid asked icily. Come on, Ast. You can't expect us to believe you would just help Hiccup Haddock out. Heather said incredulously. I mean, you hate him. We all do. Astrid rolled her eyes. Yeah, about that. She said in an embarrassed voice, swiping her bangs from over her left eye. I, just said what you expected me to say. The laughing stopped and they stared at her in shock. Look. Hiccup isn't such a bad guy and he's helped me out more than once. When he called in desperate trouble, I couldn't turn him down. When did this happen? Cammy asked. You know Ruff's party? Astrid asked, lowering her voice. They nodded, and she sighed. You know I was attacked. There was a pause and they all looked shocked. We thought Dog's breath had just hit on you. Heather murmured. It was more than that, Astrid said in a low voice. He attacked me, and he would have, but Hiccup rescued me. Three jaws dropped and they stared at her in shock. He got me out of there and walked me safely home, she admitted quietly. Really? Heather asked in shock. Astrid nodded. Look, he's just a boy, she sighed. And under his sarcastic exterior, he's actually an okay guy. He's decent and he has his own problems. She paused and looked up, to meet a pair of emerald eyes at the doorway. Hiccup leaned against the doorframe. Want me to explain? Hiccup asked wearily, a hand still resting against his battered ribs. She nodded gratefully and he limped in, self-consciously settling on the desk and meeting the astonished gazes of the girls. Look, Astrid was and is very kind to me. Heather scowled, not sure why he was here. Are you blackmailing her? She asked. Why is that always the question? He sighed. No. Then why are you here? Cammy asked. He sighed. I was thrown out of my home and I was going to freeze to death, he admitted in a quiet voice. They stared at him and every eye was disbelieving. Astrid huffed. The Monday after the party, he was cornered by his friends because he helped me, she explained. He was supposed to be helping me with my art, but he didn't show. I went looking for him, and found he had been badly beaten by his friends for rescuing me. The girls stared at her. I told him he could call me if he needed to. I offered him a place to stay then, but he said he was okay, but something happened. On the Tuesday, late, he called me. He sounded broken and I told him to come over. He was freezing, he had a nasty cough and he had no one else to turn to. Boy, sounding really needy here, Hiccup grumbled. That was weeks and weeks ago. Ruff accused Astrid. And you never said a word. You kept agreeing with us when we commented about him. Heather said with a frown. Astrid sighed. Would you have believed me if I had said leave him alone, he's a good guy? Of course not, because everyone knows. Cammy argued. Exactly, Astrid says. Everyone knows. But really, no one does. But he's always in trouble, Ruff pointed out. Not because I actually do anything, Hiccup murmured. Except the odd smart remark, Astrid reminded him, and he managed a slight smile. Yeah, but I'm so good at those. In your dreams, Astrid shot back. But in class, the teachers always single him out. He's the first to be made to stand up and attempt the work or do the test. That can't be right. Heather murmured and forced her mind back, realizing that he was in fact always the first student to be called on, usually sneered at, humiliated and then left as the other students were treated more fairly. Yeah, the teachers all really love me, he murmured. But despite that, your grades have really picked up. Astrid pointed out. There was a pause and the boy gave a small smile. I think that may be down to you, he admitted. She smiled back. Aren't your family worried? Heather asked him, knowing how concerned her own parents would be if she went missing or moved out. The change was obvious as his shoulders sagged and his eyes slammed down to the floor. All the life left his face. I was thrown out by my stepdad for being a troublemaker, he said quietly. And I tried, Odin, I couldn't have tried much more, but there was no way I could just get along with him. He drank, he hit my mom a couple of times, he used to beat me. He paused and ashamedly turned his skinny arm over, revealing a handful of circular burn marks. He used to enjoy putting out his cigars on me if I hadn't done all my chores on time. Everyone's eyes widened in shock. But I would have stayed, no matter how badly he treated me, I would have stayed for Mom, but she backed him. He finally turned her against me, and when he threw me out, I went to see her, and she told me to go away. I tried ringing and she wouldn't take my calls. I didn't know what to do, and even the one person, the one friend I could always go to, turned me away. There was silence. Your mom cut you off? Ruff said softly. Harsh. Hiccup nodded quietly. Your dad? Couldn't you go stay with him? Cammy asked. The boy stiffened. Died 5 years ago in a plane crash, he muttered, and they all looked shocked. He pressed his hands against his battered chest, then sighed. I used to work in a garage, but when I stayed there, I fought off some guys trying to break in, and Gobber was really mad at the mess I made, so, Well, we argued and I quit and then I had nowhere. The guys wanted me to help them break into there and kill the dog that had bitten the robbers, Dager's brother and his gang. Dog. Toothless. My best bud, Hiccup admitted. I had to go along with the crew, because they had already kicked the crap out of me and I had no clue what else to do. I warned Gobber and begged him to get the police or something, because the guys wanted to break in, kill Toothless and burn the place down. Dager's brother is a crazed son-of-a bitch and he had a knife, so I had no choice but to break in for them, and then the cops arrived. Of course, they got away and I got caught, and, lucky me, I ended up taken home. Wasn't your mom worried? Astrid asked. Hiccup had never told her this. He gave a small, wan smile. Al, my stepdad did all the talking, he explained wearily. She didn't say anything, she wouldn't even hug me when I was brought home. The cops bought the story about my being a troublemaker and left me at home. Then he sent Mom upstairs, and took me out to the yard. He paused and his hands tightened into fists. Hiccup, it's okay, Astrid said quietly, but he shook his head. He gave me a pasting, Astrid, he said in a rough voice. I'd been thrown out of my home once, I had been forced to help break into my friend's business and I was given no chance to explain, nothing. He beat me up and my mom watched from the upstairs window, and then she turned away. After that, I couldn't find anywhere to sleep, and I called Astrid because she was my last hope. Look, I was a coward, Astrid admitted. I chose popularity over, well, being decent. Hiccup walks to the next stop so he doesn't get on the bus with me. We don't speak at school. He tutors me because that was asked by Miss Sylvester. And he waits round the corner from the school to walk me home. His friends have turned on him because he chose me over Dog's Breath. The girls stared and Hiccup blushed. Yeah, they decided that being one of the crew should mean I should have let Dog's Breath rape Astrid at the party. So you're not hanging with them now? Heather checked. His green gaze flicked up to inspect the black-haired girl. Ask your brother, he told her directly. Ask him why I'm not one of the crew. He'll tell you it was because I refused to corner Astrid and do what Dog wouldn't. I don't know what your brother has against her, but he's dangerous and crazy. I can't believe. She began. Now who's being naive, he shot back, showing the small scar under the right corner of his mouth. Your older brother gave me this and threatened me with a knife to get me to break into Gobber's. Dager came into the school while suspended so he could help them beat me a pulp for stopping Dog's Breath rape Astrid. Your brother is the problem, and I am on his list of enemies now. That's just fantasy. Cammy protested, seeing Heather look distraught. I know Dager is a wild guy, but he would never. Fine. Hiccup snapped, sliding to his feet and wincing. Believe what you want. But I'm the only one here who's been beaten up by him. More than once, even though the guy is supposed to be my friend. I spend more time with him than any of you, so what the hell do you all know? Even Heather won't believe he's bad, but you'll all happily believe whatever you want about me. But I'm telling you, he is crazy and dangerous, and he will do something terrible if you don't take care. Astrid stared up at him and frowned. But wouldn't the staff stop him, she asked. I mean, the teachers, the principal, wouldn't they want him stopped? They don't care. Hiccup shouted, turning away. None of them care. No, you're not right, Astrid said firmly. They have a duty of care to us, and if... Duty of care? Hiccup scoffed. What duty of care? If they had any duty of care, they would ask why I turn up at school beaten up. Why I turned up at school dirty and in the same clothes. They would ask if there were problems at home that needed sorting. But they wouldn't do that because they already know. But Mr. Treacher would. Astrid, Hiccup said, turning back to her with hatred in his eyes. Alvin Treacher is my stepfather. Chapter 55, Strange Relations. Chapter text. Alvin Treacher is my stepfather. Hiccup's words were loud in the sudden silence as Astrid, Cammy, Heather and Ruff stared at him, eyes wide and mouths open in utter shock. No way. Ruff breathed. I mean, that is just insane. Hiccup arched an eyebrow. And again, you don't believe me, he snapped. I mean, why would I lie about that? Why in Odin's name would I want to own up to having anything to do with that bastard? But it's true, I wish to Odin it wasn't, but it is. You mean the guy who beat you, who burnt you with his cigars, who threw you out, is the principal? Heather gasped. Hiccup nodded. Yeah, thank you for summing it up, he said sarcastically, turning away. Hiccup, is that why you weren't suspended for attacking Mr. Mildew? Astrid asked. Hiccup paused, then nodded his head. Al hates suspending me because I'm not under his thumb, I'm home with Mom, or I was. He mumbled. So he only had to suspend me when he thought I had got most of the football team suspended. But when he found out that it was down to Dager and Snotlout, I was told to come back to school. He sighed heavily. So you rolled on them? Cammy asked sharply. Hiccup turned round with a snap, then hissed in pain. Never happened, he snapped. Gods, why does everyone say that? I would never help Earl. But he's your stepdad, you must have let something slip. Ruff insisted. Hiccup face-palmed. Between being hit in the face and locked in my room, no, he murmured defeatedly. Look, believe what you want, but your mom knows the truth. She's been to see my mom. Astrid stared at him then blinked. Is that why she's so nice to you? She asked suspiciously. He suddenly looked defensive. Actually, I think she's a nice person, he admitted wearily. She saw my mom and heard her say I was, well, a troublemaker and worthless. And I guessed she was throwing me out, but she came as I was packing and stopped me. She gave me a chance. Astrid saw him blink and turn away, and suddenly, she felt ashamed. Wincing, her head pounding, she got up and walked to him, taking his hand. And that's why you promised to watch out for me, she realized. He nodded wordlessly. It's okay, Hiccup. We believe you. His mouth quirked into a sardonic smile. Well, that's a weight off my mind, he muttered. Woo me. Okay, so we believe you, so what's he like? Cammy asked cynically. Hiccup sighed. You know at school, he asked. She nodded. Exactly like that, well, to me, he admitted. Except there was no home time and no restrictions on what he could do. Her eyes widened and she nudged Ruff, who was inspecting Hiccup very carefully, her eyes drifting to Astrid. The girl was looking green. Hiccup quietly got up and helped her back to the bed. You okay? He murmured. No, she said, and her eyes widened. She then slapped her hand over her mouth and raced from the room. They heard the sounds of throwing up, and Hiccup sighed, rubbing the back of his neck self-consciously, feeling the other's eyes watching him suspiciously. I can leave if you want, so you can talk about me, he mumbled. They looked at him and he limped to the door. Yeah, well, okay. And he left slowly, heading back to his room. The girls shared a look. What do you think? Cammy asked bluntly. She was bright and insightful but tended to be hot-headed. Heather stared after Hiccup and frowned. I'm still not convinced, she murmured. I really can't believe Dager. Heather, you know I love you, right? Ruff said. The black-haired girl nodded. Then I have to say you're the only goddamned one who doesn't. Everyone else knows Dager is dangerous, unpredictable and crazy. And we've all seen him and his crew turn on Hiccup. Not that I care one way or the other, but on the first day of the year, he was laughing and joking with the crew, and now they go out of their way to give him a hard time and target him. There must be some good reason. Heather, you can't make Dager the hero out of this, Cammy told her gently. I know he's your brother, but Astrid says Hiccup rescued her from Ruff's party, and she was very clear what had happened there, and we all saw him last night. He's got his flaws, millions of them, but I don't think he's as bad as we believed. And Dager is? Heather asked sharply. Probably worse, Astrid mumbled, walking slowly in and laying down on the bed. He broke his suspension to come in and beat up Hiccup after the party. I saw him. She closed her eyes. Look, I've been feeling bad for weeks at having to badmouth Hiccup to you guys. At least I can be honest now. But why didn't you tell us? Cammy asked, and Astrid sighed. I guess, I was scared what you would say, what everyone would say. She admitted. I mean, you guys are my best friends and you barely believed me. How would someone like Lila, or Savannah react? Obviously you'd be humiliated in front of the year to start with, and... Ruff began, and Astrid rolled her eyes. Precisely. She admitted. She sat up slowly and reached for her friend. Heather. Are you okay? The girl raised her grey eyes and sighed. I don't know, she admitted. It's a lot to take in. I mean, you have completely swallowed Hiccup's story. Which I've witnessed with my own eyes, Astrid reminded her. So you believe him? Heather asked softly. Astrid nodded. But I know my brother. Astrid took her hand gently. Sometimes people aren't who you think they are, she murmured. Hiccup certainly wasn't. Heather nodded, but she had already decided, she needed to talk to her brother. Oh. It was that afternoon when she went round to see their father in an unfashionable part of town. Oden Street wasn't a great address, and the house, though neat from the outside, was a little grubby and in need to a tidy up. But their father Oswald, a burly and amiable man with the same carrot-red hair as his sons, welcomed his only daughter with a broad grin and showed her in. He was brewing coffee as Dager stomped downstairs. His pale green eyes widened as he saw the visitor. Sis, he exclaimed. What are you doing here? Dager's mother had died shortly after he was born, but Oswald had married Heather's mother when he was only 3 months old. Heather had been born 8 months later. And though they had separated, they remained friends. Heather stared at him. I need to talk to you about something, she said as Oswald wandered out to the garage. He knew his 2 younger children liked to discuss things privately and he respected their privacy. Dager helped himself to coffee, scratched his chin and sat down opposite her. Fire away, he said. She paused and considered her words. If someone was targeting me, you would step in and kick his ass, wouldn't you? She asked him. Without a moment's thought, he said strongly. Your family. And family sticks together. Then why are you after Astrid? She asked him sharply. He stared at her, his expression suddenly cold and remote. She's not family, he said, and she needs taking down. She's my best friend. Heather shouted at him. How could you? He gave a twisted smile. I never tried anything. He began. Dog's breath did, she snapped as his eyes narrowed and brows dipped in anger. She told you that, he scoffed. She's just overreacting, the hysterical little. Hiccup Haddock saw it as well, she snapped. He stilled and glared at her. She felt a shiver run down her spine because the look was cold as midwinter Burke and twice as deadly. Ruff and Cammie's words came back, and for the first time, she believed them. Why do you believe him? He growled. Because your friend attacked mine, she snarled back. I believe her, so I have to believe him. Look, whatever you have against Astrid, stop it. He leapt to his feet. You don't tell me what to do, he shouted. No one does. Except Ozzy, she sneered. You're his lapdog. Don't push me, Dager threatened, and Heather rose to her feet to glare at him as well. Or I'll push back, she said softly. I know, Dager. And if you don't want people to find out, you'll take Astrid off your radar. Call your friends off her. Tell them she is out of bounds and not to be harmed. He glared at her. You're asking a lot, he hissed. I've protected you for years, brother, she reminded him. Don't make me regret that, because I won't let her be hurt. Dager's meaty fists tightened, the knuckles growing white. He glared at her for a long moment. Deal, he conceded finally. But Hiccup is still fair game. Heather stared at him, and nodded. Leave Astrid alone, she insisted firmly. He nodded. Where did you see Hiccup anyway? He asked curiously. She rolled her eyes, not fooled at all, but he was her brother and she still trusted him. He was round at Astrid's, she admitted. He stays there sometimes when his stepdad throws him out. The girls had all promised not to give away that he lived at the Horfusons or that he was Astrid's friend. Dager grinned. You know he's a liar, right? He reminded her, and she nodded. But Astrid trusts him, she sighed. He'll betray her, just like he betrayed me and the boys, he warned her darkly. She shrugged and got up to go speak to their dad, but he stared after her with a triumphant look in his eyes. So now I know where to find you, Hiccup, and that damned dog of yours. Chapter 56, Misjudged. Chapter text. Astrid's hangover lasted until the afternoon, long after her friends had left her to sleep it off. Ingrid had been sympathetic because talking to her friends had confirmed that Astrid had been an innocent party in the whole affair, while Hiccup had ended up as her knight in shining armor. When he had limped downstairs, still supporting his painful ribs, both Astrid's parents had thanked him warmly and made sure he had a good breakfast and some decent painkillers to help him after his ordeals. Blushing, he had mumbled that it had been nothing and had swiftly gone out to see Toothless, who had been overjoyed to see his friend. The skinny black dog had bounced and raced around and Stormfly had been almost as bad, so the boy had taken them both out for a walk, wrapped up warm and gritting his teeth as they pulled on the leads. He was very bruised and sore but both needed a good walk and Astrid was out of the picture. So he walked them carefully to the park, wincing as Stormfly pulled and jerked on his broken ribs before they got to the park. There, he let them off the leash and allowed them to race and play for a while as he watched them and caught his breath. In a way, he was relieved because at least Astrid's friends knew and she wouldn't feel so bad about bitching about him at school. He hated it but it was making Astrid uncomfortable and he hoped that would stop. He sighed and scuffed his boot in the snow. He wasn't naive enough to imagine they would give him the time of day any more than they had on Friday. And then he glanced up and saw Savage and Dagger walking towards the playground. He ducked down, and then his head snapped round as he heard a familiar voice behind him. "What are you doing down there?" Fishlegs asked. Hiccup overbalanced and ended sitting in the snow, staring up at the husky boy. He sighed and his shoulders sagged. Avoiding Dagger and Savage, he admitted. Fishlegs frowned. "Why?" "They don't like me," Hiccup admitted. "And after last night, not really up to dealing with them." "Well, they are heading this way now," the bigger boy told him and Hiccup groaned. "Thank you, Thor," he sighed. "Like my life wasn't complicated enough." "Fishman, what are you?" Savage called and then he paused, his mean eyes narrowing as he saw the sprawled shape. "Aha! You've found us a little fun." Hiccup scrambled to his feet, backing away. "Come on, guys," he protested. "I'm just sitting here in the public park, I have every right to be here." "Not if we say you don't." Dagger threatened him. "Now where's your damned dog?" Hiccup blinked. "Dog. Dog. I don't have a." He began as barks grew closer and Toothless and Stormfly raced up and began bouncing around him. "Okay, I may have a dog I'm walking, or two," he rambled. "Not that it is actually any business of yours." Dagger immediately lurched forward, but both dogs growled, teeth bared and backs arched in protection of the battered auburn-haired boy. Savage backed up a couple of steps. Dagger, this isn't the best idea," he suggested as the other boy scowled. "Call them off," he protested as the dogs advanced. Hiccup shrugged. "Maybe you should, I don't know." "Go away," he said firmly. Toothless growled louder and advanced. "Now," Hiccup said and they backed away, then turned and ran. Toothless barked but didn't leave his master's side. Hiccup grabbed his collar and scratched his head affectionately as Stormfly zoomed around, then returned to him. "They are both yours?" Fishlegs asked curiously. Hiccup gave a wry smile. No," he murmured. "Toothless is mine." He gestured to the elegant Berkhound. "Stormfly is Astrid's dog." "Astrid's?" Fishlegs gaped in shock. Hiccup sighed. "Yeah, I don't live far from her and I sorta saw how wasted she was so I offered to take Stormfly for a walk," he admitted, deftly clipping the leash to her collar again. "She's beautiful," Fishlegs commented and offered the dog his hand to sniff. "Just like her owner," Hiccup added softly. Then Fishlegs whistled and a squat brown dog waddled up, tongue hanging out of the wide mouth. "This is Meatlug, my British bulldog," he said proudly, dropping to a crouch and fussing the dog happily. "Who's a beautiful girl then?" "Yes you are. Yes you are." Hiccup couldn't help smiling at the husky boy's enthusiasm and obvious love for his dog. "She's very cute," he said as Fishlegs scratched the dog's jowls happily. The bigger boy grinned and looked up at Hiccup. "Shall we walk them together?" he asked hopefully. "Most people don't like Meatlug, I mean, she's not very fast but she is really friendly." "Hey, I'm easy," Hiccup said amiably. "I mean, Toothless is hardly a pedigree either." Fishlegs got up and Meatlug scurried ahead, pulling on her lead. "By the way, What you did for Astrid was very brave, the bigger boy said. Hiccup glanced at him and looked self-conscious. Anyone would have done it, he said quickly. No, most people wouldn't, Fishlegs mused. It was brave and very thoughtful, to risk being hurt for someone who really doesn't like you. You're a lot smarter than you let on. I think you're misjudged a lot. Hiccup shrugged. Thanks, I think. He mumbled. Fishlegs offered his hand. Friends, he suggested, and Hiccup stared at the hand in silent shock. Then he nodded and clasped the hand gratefully. Friends, he agreed. Oh. When Astrid woke, it was after lunch and her head was feeling a lot better. She swiftly showered and dressed, then went downstairs to find her mother cooking jam. She paused at the kitchen door, then walked in and gave an aimless stir. Ingrid glanced up and smiled. Head any better? She asked. Astrid smiled and poured herself a glass of juice. Loads, thanks, she mumbled. Mom, do people actually enjoy this? Ingrid smiled as she adjusted the temperature and gave another stir. Drinking, yes, usually. Hangover not so much, she admitted. And you were very drunk, my dear. You were very lucky that someone was looking out for you. Astrid blushed, shaking out a bowl of breakfast cereal. He does that a lot, she admitted. Ingrid sat down and stared at the girl. You know, I heard your friends, Astrid, she said thoughtfully. You haven't been treating him well, have you? She sighed and took a mouthful of cereal, then chewed furiously. It's so hard, she admitted. I mean, he's a total loser. Everyone hates him. And saying he was my friend would mean all those people would start being hateful to me as well. Ingrid's eyes cooled. Of course, you have to do what you feel is right, Ingrid sighed, but he has lost his home, his mother, and he's clearly been treated very badly. But he protected you when you needed it. Surely that must be worth treating him like a human being. Astrid sighed. It should be easier now the girls know, she mumbled. But if they said something cruel about Hiccup in school, you would just agree, wouldn't you? Her mother guessed. Astrid nodded. I need to stay popular, she reminded her mother. I am class president. People look to me. And none of that matters if you would treat someone you know badly for the sake of being liked by people you despise, Ingrid told her. Astrid dropped her spoon. I don't. Lila. Savannah. Ingrid asked pointedly. Well, they are pretty bitchy. Astrid admitted. Ingrid sighed. Obviously, you must live your own life, but maybe you should consider this, her mother said thoughtfully. We gave Hiccup a home here at your request. He has helped you with your revision, he walks to a different bus stop to conceal your kindness and spare your popularity, he takes the abuse you and your friends give him without a word, he has rescued you from that situation on Friday, when he was clearly badly hurt in the process. And he's even taken your dog for a walk because you were hungover. So what have you, Astrid, yourself actually done for him in return? Chapter 57, Something in Return. Chapter text. Ingrid's words rolled around Astrid's head for the whole weekend, and she realized uncomfortably that her mom was right. And though she reasoned that giving Hiccup a home was pretty generous, she had to admit that her parents had done that, and Hiccup had given up a lot to make sure Astrid wasn't really impacted in any way. She recalled how he left 10 minutes before she did so he could make it to the next stop from her house, how he accepted being generally bad-mouthed and sneered at by the girls and had still continued to tutor her and walk her home. She smiled. In fact, the best part of the day was the quiet time when she could walk away from school, drop the act and meet Hiccup round the corner, walking alongside him and telling him about her day. And he had been calm, philosophical and sometimes very insightful when he had spoken. He was someone whose opinion she valued, just not enough to actually acknowledge he existed outside of the home. And then she groaned and ran her fingers through her hair. That sounded horrible. It was horrible. And she was too much of a coward to change it. But she did owe Hiccup, for getting her away from the fight, for landing him in trouble with everyone when she told Mr. Treacher who had started the fight, for the party, for walking her home that night, for tutoring her, for saving her on Friday, for punishing Lila and Savannah. She worked steadily through her homework on Sunday, making sure Hiccup was okay because he had been badly beaten and he had been quiet and reserved. Something had altered and she wondered if the girls had said anything to upset him. But she knew he deserved better, and as she recalled his words, a plan began to form. There was something that she could do for him and she could put it into action tomorrow. Oh. Monday was cold and snowy, the wind icy and damp. Being Burke, everyone just got on with things, wrapped up warm and carried on with life as usual. Hiccup wrapped up warm and left before Astrid raced down for breakfast, walking slowly along the icy sidewalk. Astrid had been quiet all weekend and he wondered if she was embarrassed that her secret had gotten out. He hoped that wouldn't mean she would want him to leave, because she had heard the girls talk and knew that she was afraid for her popularity. He hunched his shoulders as he walked. It was a bitter morning and even his new coat wasn't keeping the cold out. But he quietly stood at the bus stop and got on when the bus arrived, walking past Astrid to take a vacant seat at the back. He sighed. It was going to be another long week. He was subject to more mutters and curious glances than he was comfortable with, but Dager, Savage and Thuggery were as welcoming as ever and Hiccup was slammed aside, hissing as he hit the door of his locker. "I hear you missed a chance to get Astrid laid." Dager hissed. "What's it to you, Dag?" Hiccup snapped, his emerald eyes glittering. "You want Visithugs laughing at Burke." "'Cause I don't." Dager slammed him back again. "What's so great about Burke?" he sneered and shoved the skinny boy back again, before sauntering away. Hiccup grimaced, and then found a hand offered to help him up. He glanced up, to see Tough Nut standing by him. "You okay, man?" he asked and Hiccup grimaced. "Just peachy," he said sarcastically but accepted the hand and allowed himself to be hauled up. "Thanks." Tough gave him a thoughtful look. "No sweat," he shrugged and wandered back to his locker. Hiccup stared after him and then headed for his first class. He needed to speak to Miss Sylvester because he had an idea how to give Astrid something in return for her kindness. So he found the teacher preparing the lesson and he approached her hesitantly. What he was about to say was so outrageous and insane he couldn't see it working, but it was the only way, definitely the only way to give Astrid what she needed. The teacher looked up and her eyes crinkled in a smile. "You look very serious, and rumor has it you're a school hero," she said gently. He blushed and shrugged. I only did what needed to be done," he said self-consciously. "But, I came to see you about Astrid." Miss Sylvester smiled. "I am impressed," she commented. "Your tutoring has definitely improved her performance. She has moved from a solid C grade to a definite B." He sighed. "She needs an A," he admitted. She inspected him and frowned, seeing the concern in his green eyes. "Why?" she asked. "I mean, I have to agree with your earlier assessment that she does need to learn that she can't be good at everything." He rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment. I have learned since then why she needs the A," he said and stared at the floor for a moment. "Please, this is confidential." He met her kind eyes and she nodded. "Of course," she said. Taking a breath, he explained the pressure she was under and also what she had done for him. The teacher's eyes widened and she stared at him in shock. "You were homeless," she gasped. He nodded. "Astrid and her family took me in and have given me a home ever since," he said in an ashamed voice. "And I understand why she needs her grades. Without them, she won't be supported in going to college, and she deserves to. But she isn't good enough to get an A," Miss Sylvester pointed out gently and he nodded. "I know," he said and took a deep breath. "But, I have a plan." She raised an eyebrow. I hate to suggest this, but maybe, a project." Miss Sylvester frowned. "You know I really don't like the concept, it's such a cliché." She reminded him and he nodded. He sighed. "But I want to give Astrid a chance of an A, and the only way I could do that is if we do a project, with her and me, and I can manage to get us a good enough mark to bring her up to an A." Miss Sylvester inspected him closely and walked to rest a hand on his shoulder. "You really want this, don't you?" she asked him and he nodded. "But what can she contribute?" He lifted his emerald eyes and gave a small smile. "If you make it a project with research and interpretive elements as well as artistic," he said. "Say, looking at a famous work of art, its history and importance and reimagining it in that context." She stared at him and started laughing. "Worthy of an art teacher, or tutor," she smiled. "You have been thinking about this?" She's done so much for me, and I really wanted to give her something in return, he admitted to her. Please? She patted his shoulder again and looked up as the door opened. The bell had rung while they were talking. I'll consider it, hiccup, she said gently. Now take your place. I'll let class know by the end of the lesson. Oh. Cheer practice was cancelled that afternoon, so Astrid texted Hiccup to let him know she was walking into town after school. Despite being in detention, he had texted back that if she let him know, he'd meet her on the way to walk her home. She smiled. She knew he was worried about Dager's threats against her, but she was with her friends as they walked into town, heading for a specific location she had checked and double-checked. Finally, they found it, tucked away in a side road. Heather stared up at the sign. The Forge, she read. Are they for real? This is the place he told me he used to work, run by a family friend who believes he's a bad guy, Astrid told her firmly, adjusting her woolly hat slightly. It's a car repair place. Cammy frowned. Why would we actually want to go in here? Fine. I'll go in and you can all wait outside. Astrid snapped and pulled the door open, stalking in. She heard footsteps behind her and the other three walked in rapidly. We never said we weren't coming. Ruff protested. And it's cold outside. So they all huddled round the small and not very efficient panel heater while Astrid walked a little further into the workshop. Hello, she called and saw movement. She stopped and her eyes widened as a very solid and bulky man eased his ample frame up from the floor, his left hand replaced by a hook and his right lower leg also a prosthetic. His grimy coveralls strained over his ample middle and his bald head was concealed under a grimy cap, a long braided blonde moustache completing his appearance. Can I help you, lass? He asked, his thick Scottish brogue unfamiliar. She nodded. My name is Astrid Horferson and I've come here because I have a problem, she said without hesitation. I need to speak to you about Hiccup Haddock. Chapter 58, I need to speak to you about Hiccup Haddock. Chapter text. I need to speak to you about Hiccup Haddock. The big mechanic's face creased into a scowl at the name, his body tending. The mood noticeably altered. Got nothing to say, he snapped. Excuse me, Mr. Belcher, you are Mr. Gobber Belcher, but I have. Astrid said firmly. The mechanic gave a sneer. You don't know what you're talking about, he growled. Astrid folded her arms pointedly. Or maybe you don't, she suggested. Because from what I heard, you never let him explain, you didn't give him any sort of a chance, and despite being his oldest friend, the one person I thought I could always rely on, you sent him away. Gobber turned to face her, his expression cold. And he told you he helped some hoodlums break into my garage, he snapped. And he told you he'd been thrown from his home with nothing but what he stood in. That he had no food. That he'd had the crap kicked out of him for rescuing me from some slime basket at the party 2 days earlier. That one of the hoodlums had a knife and threatened him. Astrid's voice was sharp. He slept here without me permission and made a right mess. Gobber growled. Really? So the guys breaking in and ransacking the place and stealing your stuff would have been better, she shot back. Gobber lurched forward to stand in her face. He broke in for them, he snarled. Excuse me, but neither of my brothers would take no for an answer, and both of them wouldn't have held back if he'd refused. Heather reluctantly admitted. Astrid stared at her in shock. And you do know that when you let him go with the police, they took him back to his mom and stepdad? Astrid checked. There was curt nod. And that after the police left him, he was dragged out back, beaten up and thrown out into the night. Val would ne'er allow that. Gobber grumbled. Hiccup's mom watched and turned away. Astrid said quietly. She won't see him or return his calls. He's living with me now because I was the last person he had left to call. Otherwise, he would have frozen. Gobber shook his head. He could always call family services, he mumbled. Yeah, I can see Hiccup asking for that at 11 o'clock at night when the police would just contact his home and his stepdad would say he ran away, Astrid said quietly. They'd take him back to his supposedly caring parents and gods know what would happen to him. She sighed. That's his choice. Gobber growled. You know, no one knew his dad had died, Astrid sighed. No one realized he was so unhappy. He was treated like crap, got years, and he ended up with the worst crowd in school. But even they turned on him when he wouldn't harm someone just for fun. Gobber suddenly fell silent and looked ashamed. That sounds like Hiccup. He always was stubborn, but he had a good heart. So why did you reject him? He had almost no one. That was his doing. He knew I didn't want him in my garage. Then why didn't you offer him somewhere else? My apartment were flooded. Gobber snapped. I had to look out for myself. I had nowhere to go. And you felt nothing for him. You knew how hard his life was. I thought you were his uncle or godfather or... Godfather? His dad was my best friend from first day in elementary school. Mr. Belcher. Gobber the big man corrected her, scratching his ear with his hook. Everyone calls me Gobber. Gobber Astrid continued with a smile, Hiccup isn't a bad guy. Well, his dad would have been ashamed if his son had let a lady walk home alone in the dark, Gobber mumbled. He was very strict about making sure his son was brought up with manners. But he's sarcastic and rude and causes trouble wherever he goes. Cammy protested. Gobber gave a wry smile. That's Hiccup, he shrugged. The lad was always a sarky wee twig. But he was ne'er so angry or careless until they had tie live wi Alvin bloody treacher. That swine has been beating that boy for years. So why did you abandon him when he needed you? Astrid asked directly. He was literally freezing and starving when he came round to my house. He does everything to protect me. He stopped me being taken advantage of even though he knew it would get him in trouble. He helps me with my homework and revision. He's sweet on your... Gobber said sagely with an inappropriate wink. Astrid blushed. This isn't about me. Why did you just toss him aside? She demanded. You know, losing his mom and losing you really broke him. And my mom has tried, but his mom now thinks he's worthless. Don't tell me you don't care about him either. Gobber looked embarrassed that this beautiful and determined young woman had come into his garage and roundly told him off. And it had been easy in his own fog of annoyance to forget that the boy had been his godson for so long. But he had been mad when he watched the boy break into his garage, reckoning it was ingratitude and primarily revenge, and he felt ashamed for his dead friend that his only son could turn out so bad, so he hadn't even listened to the boy's desperate pleas for forgiveness. And he had stopped them breaking in. How is that mart of his, Toothless? He asked. Astrid smiled. You know Toothless? She asked. Gobber nodded, scratching his ample belly. He used to stay here, since that Alvin would ha set his dog on him, he admitted. Toothless is great, Astrid smiled. My dog Stormfly loves having him around for company. And he's no trouble, like his owner. Gobber backed up a pace and looked harried as the girls all stared between him and Astrid. Few people could out-argue Astrid Horferson when she was determined. Okay. I get the message, he protested. But what can I do? Say you believe him. Astrid suggested. Talk to him. Ruff added. Treat him like a real person. Cammy added. Astrid sighed and took a deep breath. Give him his job back, she said. Jerking his head up, Gobber stared at her. You're joking. I already got a replacement. He grumbled. Astrid glared at him. Give him a crumb of self-worth, she snapped. He's a good mechanic, I understand. And he valued the fact that he worked. Cammy scowled at her. How did you know that? She demanded. He mentioned it in art, she admitted. You like him too? Ruff surmised. Do not. He's just a nice guy. Do too, Heather smirked. You're blushing. You're the girl from art. The one who tried to get him thrown out at the start of the year. Gobber asked in shock. Astrid blushed more fiercely. Yeah, but then I got to know him and, found he was worth far more than I realized, she mumbled. Gobber inspected her and nodded. Okay, he said. Hiccup has given you a second chance, and now you're here asking for the same for him. I'll speak to him, lass. Can't promise anything because he may want naught to do with me. Astrid smiled. Somehow, I think he will, she smiled as her phone buzzed. It was Hiccup. Detention over. You okay? Finished. She tapped in a reply. Her phone buzzed. He's on his way. Chapter 59, worth it. Chapter text. There was a tense wait as the girls settled and hung around until Hiccup arrived. Gobber had brewed them all some really dreadful coffee which they had politely tried to drink, but Ruff had made some choking noises and she and Cammy had started a coffee fight. Astrid had been shown the back of the shop, where the lockers were, and she gazed at the cold and grubby space where her friend had been forced to sleep. Gobber saw her face. "You does care for the lad," he said, and she nodded. "He's not like anyone I know," she admitted. "He's just kind and thoughtful and smart and brave and